Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of what if Deku's forbidden fire could heal shared scars? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Life isn't fair, and it certainly isn't kind. Little Izuku doesn't know what that means yet, but he does know that his father acts differently when he's at home and when he's outside. He watches silently as his father smiles and laughs with other people on the few occasions he sees his father in public and cowers under Hisashi's hard sneer and rough hand within the confines of their home. Being a bad person is not the same thing as being a villain. Hisashi is not a villain yet, but he is a bad person. Like all children, the only world Izuku knows is his own. He thinks his world is absolute, and so Izuku doesn't know that it's wrong. He just knows that it is. It always has been and always will be this way, he thinks. But the first time his father beats his mother, Izuku's world snaps. Hisashi had never been gentle either with Izuku or Inko, in the privacy of their home. But he hadn't been outright violent either. That is, until he became violent. One day Hisashi came home drunk, and it was only a backhanded slap to Inko's face then. But after that one time, it became a common occurrence. Then it got worse. He started really beating her. Then, he began to beat her even when he wasn't drunk. Inko has started locking Izuku away in the broom cupboard whenever it was time for Hisashi to come back home, fearful of what the man might do to their helpless son. And Izuku does feel helpless. He curls into himself sobbing silently as all he can do is listen to the furious panting and swearing of his father, the muffled cries of his mother, and the merciless sound of flesh pounding on flesh. He scrabbles at the door until his fingertips are bleeding, but he is never able to get out until his father wanders away to sleep in the bedroom and his mother, tired and broken and bruised and bloody, is finally able to pick herself off the floor and deems it safe enough to retrieve him. But one day, Hisashi comes home sooner than expected. Inko panics. She drags and shoves Izuku inside the broom cupboard, but in her haste doesn't have time to lock it. Hisashi, not knowing and perhaps not even caring, just falls into habit and starts beating her. But Izuku does know and does care, so he scrabbles at the door with raw fingertips, and this time, it actually opens. Izuku's small body comes tumbling out into the living room. Both his parents turn to him, Inko's bruised face falling in horror and Hisashi's features twisting into a sneer. "What's this?" he asks, but soon turns away from Izuku's trembling body with a scoff. "Whatever. Run along, boy, I don't have time to deal with you right now." Inko's defeated body sags with relief, but Izuku's freezes with despair. Hisashi is approaching Inko again, not even caring that Izuku is there. If there's one thing that's greater than Izuku's fear of his father, it's his fear for his mother. But Izuku knows that he can't do anything to stop his father. Hisashi is the absolute ruler of their household. He's too big and too strong, and is hellbent on beating his mother again. Izuku can't stop his father. He can't save his mother. So Izuku does the only thing he can. He steps between them. What? No, Izuku, darling, you can't be. Listen to what your father said and run. Inko reaches for her son feebly, but her legs have stopped working either from being strained or stressed. Already dark spots are invading her vision, and she can barely keep her eyes on the small, shaking back of her son as he stands between herself and Hisashi. Hisashi sneers, licks of flame flickering menacingly at the corners of his mouth. "You dare disobey me, boy?" Izuku trembles, but stands his ground. Hisashi slaps him. Izuku's face whips to the side, his small body swaying with the force of the blow. And yet, he still stays between his parents. This time, Hisashi punches him. Izuku falls to the ground. But he gets back up before Hisashi can take another step towards Inko. Hisashi kicks him, throws him, stomps him, breathes fire on him. But Izuku keeps getting up. Again and again and again, more bruised and bloody and tearful every single time, but he still gets up and stands between Hisashi and Inko. Eventually, Hisashi seems to have blown off enough steam that he wanders towards the bedroom without going back to Inko, who seems to have fainted at some point. Izuku stands there a moment more, panting and crying silently, adrenaline pumping through his veins, bruises and cuts and burns riddling his body. But his mother is mercifully unharmed. And for a moment, Izuku is exhilarated. He wasn't able to stop his father, or completely save his mother, but at least he has been able to protect her from more harm. At this moment, he feels taller than a skyscraper, stronger than all might. He feels like a hero. Inko awakes, and Izuku smiles at her. "It's okay, Mom," he whispers, unknowingly smiling through the blood on his teeth. "I'm here. I protected you." But when Inko takes a look at her battered and bloody son, she breaks down sobbing. It's a testament to just how much Hisashi has them under his control that even half hysterical and broken as she is, she still chokes and muffles her cries so as not to disturb the sleeping man. "I'm sorry, Izuku," she whispers through her sobs, not daring to hug her son lest she worsens his numerous wounds. "I am so sorry, Izuku." And as Izuku looks down at his mother, who is curled up in front of him on the floor in a cruel parody of a Dejiza, his adrenaline rush and exhilaration comes crashing down and he thinks, "No, Mom, that's not what I wanted you to say. What I wanted you to say was..." Before he can finish that thought, Izuku blacks out. Izuku learns how to pick locks with bobby pins and paper clips. The next time Inko locks him in the broom cupboard, he frantically fumbles in the dark until the lock clicks and he comes tumbling out once more. He finds Hisashi standing over Inko with a bloodied fist. He steps between them. It happens. Again. And again. And again. Inko learns that locking Izuku up is no use anymore and stops trying. All she does is cry. A few more times, and Hisashi doesn't even bother going for Inko anymore. He starts coming straight for Izuku. It hurts. It hurts, it hurts, it hurts, and Inko's muffled sobbing hurts even more. But even through the blinding pain and flames, Izuku bares his teeth in a twisted parody of a smile. Because Hisashi beating him means that he isn't beating Izuku's mother. Izuku learns that day that defeat can taste like victory. Most people manifest their quirk before the age of 4. Izuku's 4th birthday comes and goes without him showing even a hint of a quirk, and a worried Inko takes the opportunity when Hisashi is out for the day to quickly shuttle Izuku to the hospital. He doesn't have the second joint in his toe that would make him quirkless, the doctor says, pointing at his X-ray. It may be that young Midoriya does indeed have a quirk, but he just hasn't activated it yet. Is there anything that might be pressuring him or oppressing him? Inko looks at the doctor wildly, because she doesn't know where to even start. Then she looks down at her young son, who's looking up at her with wide bright eyes, who's never known what it's like not to be oppressed, that he doesn't even know he is being oppressed. A sob threatens to break out, but Inko stifles it with practiced ease. She takes her son's hand, and they leave wordlessly. Later, when they've almost reached home, Izuku quietly whispers, "I hope I get your quirk," he says softly. "I hope I get your quirk, and not the one that hurt you so much." That hurt him so much, he doesn't say. Izuku looks up at Inko, and his bright green eyes are full of sincerity. "I want to protect you. I want to be a hero." And at that, not even Inko can keep in the tears. But life isn't fair, and it certainly isn't kind. Hisashi had come home while the two of them were out, and he is furious at their absence. "What do you think you're doing?" he hisses, flames rolling out of his mouth with his every breath. "You think you can just run around as you please? You dare defy me?" This time he isn't just generally taking out his violent nature. No, he's focused and angry at them. At Inko, to be exact. For the first time in months, Hisashi lunges not for Izuku, but Inko. "No!" Izuku yells, throwing himself in front of a wide-eyed and frozen Inko. His back is to Hisashi, trying to shield his mother from the flames that flicker from the man's furious breath. He's desperate and scared and frantic, and for a wild moment, he thinks he won't be enough. Izuku pushes with all he has, trying to get his mother out of the literal line of fire. Something bursts out from within him, and Hisashi lets out a shocked sound. Izuku opens the eyes that he hadn't noticed he'd closed to find Inko staring at him with something akin to horror. Her wide eyes clearly reflect back Izuku's reflection, and he finds that there's an almost halo of flames at his back. Izuku opens his mouth to assure her that it doesn't hurt, but Inko beats him to it. She screams. The sharp, shrill sound penetrates Izuku's heart and freezes his blood. He recoils because she's screaming at the sight of him and his fire, and he never wanted to hurt her, he only wanted to protect her. Why? At that moment, the flames that had been burning harmlessly at his back turn against him. And now it does hurt, and Izuku's screams joins Inko's as his flesh is burned by his own quirk. Their sick harmony of screaming is cut short when Hisashi harshly slaps each of them in turn. Inko crumples to the ground, either from the force of the blow or from shock. But by now Izuku is too used to pain for the bliss of unconsciousness to take him at just one blow, and even with his back and shoulders a mess of pain, he's still alert enough to raise his trembling head and look up at Hisashi's mad grin. "Well, looky here," the man laughs harshly, flames liking at his lips. "What have we got here, boyich? You're not breathing it out like I do, but I'll be d'med if that's not a fire quirk." "My fire quirk." Hisashi leans down to Izuku, his black curly hair brushing against the child's forehead and his black eyes boring into his very soul. Then he breathes the words that will haunt Izuku for life, that burn themselves onto his beating heart, that plague his every hopes and dreams. Like father, like son. When Inko wakes up again, she's lying down with a blanket pulled over her, Hisashi nowhere in sight. "I'm sorry, Mom," a quiet voice calls out, and Inko whips her head around. Izuku is standing a few feet away from the foot of her blanket, like he's unsure of whether he's allowed to come near her. His head is hanging, his hands are clasped in front of him, his shirt is torn and kept together by awkwardly looped bandages, and he reeks of the familiar smell of burned cream. A sob catches in Inko's throat. "No, darling. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Izuku." Izuku opens his mouth like he wants to say something, then closes it. Inko waits, but her son says nothing, so she opens her arms wordlessly, not trusting herself to be able to form any more words. He steps closer to her, shoulders sagging in relief, and Inko holds her son around his waist, careful of the loose bandages and burned cream on his upper back. After a moment, Izuku slowly raises his arms to cradle her head. She's not sure if the slow movements are because of the pain in his back, or because he's hesitating from the uncertainty that she might reject him since she's already screamed at him. The vulnerability in his trembling body breaks her heart all over again. Inko wants to apologize again. She wants to tell him that she's sorry that she freaked out, that it's not his fault, that she's sorry she birthed him like this, that she's sorry he feels like he has to protect her and not the other way around. All that makes out of her mouth, though, is a broken sob. Being a bad person is not the same thing as being a villain. Hisashi had been a bad person, a bad father, and a bad man, but he hadn't been an outright, public villain that got heroes chasing after him. But Hisashi used to not be violent, and then he became violent. Just like that, this changes too, and not too long after Izuku realizes his quirk, a new villain makes himself known to the world. Perhaps seeing Izuku with his quirk had changed something in Hisashi. Perhaps he just got bored of keeping his violent nature hidden in the confines of their small home. Izuku doesn't know, and doesn't ever want to understand, why, and for the longest time he doesn't even know what. All he knows is that Hisashi comes back home late more often, smelling of smoke and ashes and wearing a satisfied grin that usually only comes after he de-stressed with a thorough beating session with Izuku. As if he'd already taken out his anger on someone else, Izuku later thinks back in sick realization. Months pass before Izuku and Inko clue into the fact that Hisashi has become a villain. And they don't even learn it from the man himself. They are too afraid of him to ask anything, and he thinks so little of them to actually tell them anything after all. It happens like this. Hisashi hasn't come home in 3 days, and the bruises Izuku got from his last beating are slowly starting to fade away. But neither he or Inko dare hope their luck will last and are waiting with bated breath, tiptoeing on thin ice. But then they see the news about a fire-breathing villain being caught by some hero. They see the blurry picture of a man with curly black hair, snapping black eyes and flames spilling out of his mouth, cuffed and led by the police. They both see, they both recognize, and for a long time, all they can do is stare at the screen. It's anticlimactic. It almost doesn't feel real. Inko and Izuku still jump whenever heavy footsteps approach their front door, even if it turns out to only be the mailman, still have a habit of talking softly even though there's no one in the house that will beat them for being loud, and still have a light if any phobia can be called light pyrophobia. Wounds don't heal easily, after all, and scars take even longer to fade. But Izuku will take it. Even if they're jittery and jumpy and nervous, it's worlds better than being bruised and bloody. It's worlds better than having to watch someone else become bruised and bloody. The hero that caught Hisashi is not well known. Their name isn't even mentioned in any of the press. But Izuku digs until he finds them, then he finds everything he can about them. The information a 5-year-old can dig up is admittedly little, not to mention that there isn't much about the hero in the first place, but the heart of a determined boy isn't easily put down. Izuku finds all he can about this hero. He learns their name. He learns that they've just recently made their formal debut. He finds and prints out a blurry picture of the hero that looks like it's from a paused footage of a security camera. He carefully tacks it on his wall, right next to his favorite poster of All Might. They move. With Hisashi unceremoniously leaving and their sole source of income abruptly cut off, Inko has to work and leave Izuku alone. But still, even struggling to make ends meet, they move. Neither of them has any love for the place where Hisashi taints their memories like bloodstains on a wall. So they move to a smaller apartment in a different town. There, Izuku meets Bakugo Katsuki. Izuku sees him standing over a crying child in the playground, laughing with youthful cruelty. And Izuku knows that Bakugo isn't Hisashi, that this child is an Inko. But he looks at the blasts firing in Bakugo's hands, at the tears on the child's face, and does the only thing he knows to in this situation. He steps between them. You playing it hero, Deku? You don't even have a quirk. I have a quirk. Yeah? Then show it. Izuku doesn't. Because he really, really wishes he didn't have this quirk. Izuku doesn't want anything to do with his quirk that so obviously came from his father, that's so destructive and painful, that made his mother scream, but he still inadvertently comes to know some facts about it. Quirks are as much a part of you as your limbs are, so accidental bursts of flame erupt from time to time until Izuku learns to keep a tight lid on it. In doing so, though, he learns more about his quirk. Hisashi had commented on how Izuku's fire quirk was different than his own, and it's true. Hisashi had breathed fire only from his mouth, but Izuku can emit it from any part of his body, though he can still breath it out like a dragon. Like his father, he resolutely doesn't think. It feels less like making fire and more like pushing it out of his own body. He also learns that there's another side to the coin. When he accidentally uses his quirk and emits a burst of flame, thankfully when he's alone in the bathroom, because he never wants to use this in front of his mother again, never wants to remind her of his father again, never wants to make her scream like that again, he feels a tug of something that leaves him almost breathless. He feels like he's just let out a long breath, but hasn't taken in another breath yet. His hand twitches involuntarily, and a toothbrush comes soaring towards him. It smacks him in the forehead before falling to the ground, and Izuku can only look down at it dumbly. It takes a moment to click, and when it does, Izuku laughs and laughs until he feels sick, because he doesn't know what else to do. He remembers that day when he was 4, when he'd been walking home with his mother from the doctor's. "I hope I get your quirk," he had told her. "I hope I get your quirk, and not the one that hurt you so much. I want to protect you. I want to be a hero." But it looks like he got both quirks. The one that hurts and the one that could, maybe, protect. He's not sure what to think of that. Of course, things aren't as easy as just using one side of his quirk, because life isn't fair and it certainly isn't kind. Izuku tries training his ability to pull things towards him, but it soon becomes clear that he can't only do that. Once he uses half his quirk to pull something towards him, the other half of his quirk struggles and wants to push out fire. He tries to control the impulse, but it's physically taxing to keep it in. It feels like trying to inhale, then inhale again without exhaling. You just can't keep doing it. At some point, you have to let out that breath, else you choke and suffocate. Pull and push, then out. Like breathing. Once Izuku pulls something towards him, he has to push out a bit of fire. He can't use one part of his quirk without using the other. And that almost crushes him, Because Izuku promised his mother he'd protect and become a hero, but he also promised himself that he'd never use the fire that reminds them both so much of Hisashi. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know what he can do without becoming like his father. Izuku enters middle school and he's in the bathroom once more, this time staring at his own reflection in the mirror. He thanks whatever higher powers there are that he doesn't look much like Hisashi. Midoriya Izuku takes after Midoriya Inko so much that even strangers would look at them and know their relation at first glance. They have the same soft round features, the same big eyes, and the same green irises. But Izuku looks at his hair. Inko's hair is straight, and the color is a solid green. Izuku's hair is curly, and the color is more black that has a green sheen when the light hits it. It's similar enough to his mother, but at the same time it has undeniable traces of him. His curly black hair, the image of which is still burned into Izuku's memories even after all these years. He doesn't want his mother to look at him and see his father. He doesn't want himself to look in the mirror and see his father. Izuku slowly raises a hand and rakes back the hair from his forehead, smoothing it out on top of his head. He had grown out his hair so that it's at a length that it just barely brushes his chin. He can comfortably take it and twist half of it into a small messy bun, mimicking his mother's hairstyle. He sticks some bobby pins in to hold it in place and considers the end result in the mirror. Most of the curls that used to make up his wild, fluffy hair are slicked back and pinned into the bun. There are some strands that fall out and frame his face, but they're not overly curly. Surely a far cry from the fluffy mop of hair it was before, and nodding more to Inko's hairstyle than Hisashi's own mess of curls. Izuku nods to himself. He is not going to be like his father. When Izuku walks into the kitchen and Inko first sees his new hairstyle, she almost drops the plate of dumplings she has in her hands. Izuku just shrugs with a half smile. "It was getting in my eyes," he says by way of explanation. Then he wavers, because he knows she can see the similarity, the difference, and asks in a smaller voice, Does it look weird? Do you dislike it?" Inko stares at her son for a moment more, before putting on a brave smile. "You look lovely, dear. I'll love you no matter what." Another year passes, and Izuku confronts his hero. Can you become a hero without a quirk? No, All Might answers his desperate question. No, echoes a voice that sounds like the half-buried memory of his father. You are nothing without me. You're wrong, Izuku tries to tell the voice, brushing away his tears. I won't use your quirk. I won't become like you. But this cruel phantom only laughs and envelopes Izuku's hunched form in a mockery of an embrace, caressing the scars branded on his back, breathing flaming poison in his ear, reminding him. Like father, like son. But yes, All Might tells him later. Izuku had seen Bakugo, the one person in the world who reminds him the most of his father, besides Izuku himself, in the suffocating embrace of the slime villain, and he didn't think. He just did what he had always done. He stepped well. He couldn't exactly step between them yet, given that Bakugo was practically inside the villain, but he ran towards them, reaching with his quirk and pulling Bakugo despite the fact that he well knew the backlash would make him push out the flames he hated so much. At that moment he didn't care. He couldn't care. Bakugo was tugged out of the villain's grasp, coughing up slime from his mouth. Izuku shoved the other boy behind him, finally stepping between him and the villain. The buildup of his quirk had him panting, and Izuku knew he would have to push out some fire soon lest he suffocated, so he clenched his teeth and pushed as small a flame as he could out of his hand. It felt similar to the sensation of trying to swallow down instead of coughing up blood bubbling up his throat, but at least now his quirk felt more balanced and he could breathe again. Not that it helped the situation with the slime villain in front of him, but All Might had saved the day. And now, he's here in front of Izuku, telling him the one thing that Inko couldn't confirm and Hisashi made him doubt and he himself wished for but perhaps never truly believed. You can be a hero. Daedalus crafts wings of feathers and wax for himself and his son. He ties a pair of wings to his shivering son, ignoring the boy's wince as the straps dig harshly into his flesh. Be sure to follow me, boy, Daedalus warns. Never fly too high. Just follow me. But father, Icarus whispers. I want to reach the sun. Daedalus' face suddenly twists in rage. You dare defy me, boy? he spits out, and Icarus thinks he sees a jet of flame come out of his mouth like the fire-breathing monsters he's only heard stories of. The boy stumbles back, then turns his back to his father and takes off running, until the momentum builds under his wings and he's flying. Icarus yelps, terrified at first, but then he realizes that he's actually free. He turns his face to the sun and reaches for it, flying higher, closer, until he thinks that maybe, just maybe, he can reach it. Be it. But as Icarus nears the sun, this beacon of light and hope, its heat starts melting the wax and scorching the feathers of his wings. And suddenly it's not Icarus but Izuku whose wings are burning on his back and shoulders, and he hurts so much, and there's a shrill voice that's not his screaming in his ear, and somewhere below him deadless no, Hisashi laughs cruelly. You can never be the sun, boy. You belong down here with me. The man laughs, lazily flapping his own wings, his black eyes dancing with malicious mirth. Like father, like son. And those words burn more than any physical pain ever could. So Izuku grits his teeth and straightens his hunched back. No, he says through his tears. I will not be like you. Izuku forces his chin up and faces the sun once more, reaching for it with all his strength even as it makes the wings his father tied to him melt and burn and sear and scar his skin. Tears stream down his face, but Izuku bares his teeth and strains and grasps and hopes and wishes and pulls. But then he is pushed back, pushed down, pushed away, and Izuku falls, down to the sound of Hisashi's laughter and his mother's screams. He falls. And Izuku wakes with a gasp. He wakes to find his hands desperately scrabbling at his back and shoulders, and has to consciously force them down. His back burns, but he knows it's mostly only phantom pain aside from the scratches he must have given himself in his sleep. And that's not exactly good, but it's okay, because Izuku has long since learned to bear physical pain. It's a different kind of pain that makes his breath short. Izuku grasps blindly in the dark until his hand closes on his phone. He pushes back the long locks of hair tumbling into his eyes with one hand while the other frantically flicks through his contacts. The list isn't long, in fact, it's laughably short, but it takes an agonizingly long time for him to find what he's looking for because Izuku is shaking so much that his bloodied fingertips keep slipping over the screen. This is dumb, he knows. This need to confirm that meeting All Might wasn't just a fever dream is dumb, irrational, and downright pathetic. And he knows that he won't even find All Might's name in his contacts list because he made sure that it wouldn't be there. What if he loses his phone, or someone hacks it? It's not impossible with his rotten luck, and he will never endanger All Might's secret like that, so at best, all he'll find is the pseudonym he saved the hero's number under, but there it is. Izuku's entire body stills as his thumb hovers over the screen detailing All Might's contact info. It has the series of numbers that Izuku religiously memorized by heart the moment he received them. It has the pseudonym he secretly saved them under. The sun. A sound that's something between a strangled sob and a wretched laugh makes its way out of Izuku's mouth. He muffles it against the back of his hand, not wanting to wake his mother. He clutches his phone tightly to his chest with both hands, and his hair spills around his face in messy curls as he hunches protectively over it. He doesn't even care that he's being pathetic anymore. Because he has All Might's number on his phone, which means he actually met his hero, and he really asked Izuku to be his successor, and told him he could be a hero. Izuku kneels on his bed with his phone clutched to his chest and phantom fire burning his back and silent sobs and laughter choked in his throat. He is going to be All Might's successor. He is going to be a beacon of hope. He is going to be a hero. He is not going to be like his father. Even if he has to burn himself down. Izuku hasn't had many or any positive older figures to look up to that he could actually meet in real life and not just fanstalk on the internet. But now that the very person who's been the oldest subject of said fanstalking is living, breathing, and puking blood in front of him, Izuku doesn't know how to act. The training part is easy, because while Izuku has never had enough guidance to actually be able to train his body, Inko couldn't help no matter how much she wanted to. Those who could help didn't want to. Izuku wasn't dumb enough to try to train by himself without professional supervision, and he would never dare ask his mother to enroll him in some gym or dojo and put even more strain on her. All Might has done all the heavy lifting for him. The man has already drawn up an entire training plan and even now is making adjustments as necessary as he gets to know Izuku's body better. All Izuku has to do is push through his exhaustion and pain enough to just stick to the plan made for him. And pain? That's something that Izuku is more than familiar with. So no, despite All Might's initial worries, Izuku is fine with the training itself, grueling and hard as it is. What unsettles him is his interactions with his mentor, he supposes. And God, did he almost have a heart attack right then and there when he first realized that he was now qualified to call All Might his mentor. The thing is, the first time All Might had called him, my boy, Izuku had almost flinched. My boy, Izuku had to remind himself. Not harsh and impersonal, not a barked boy, that's more a command than a call, but, my boy, warm and encouraging and even dare he say it affectionate. But even so, the endearment catches Izuku off guard from time to time, and he has to take a moment blinking wildly before he can respond with an appropriate smile. And that frustrates Izuku. Isashi has no right tainting the one pure good thing in his life, and the man does it without even trying. Without even having been present for the last 9 years. It's just so unfair. But then again, Izuku already knows that life isn't fair, and it certainly isn't kind. Everything good Izuku has ever hoped for has either been stripped away from him or left broken in his hands. He can't let that happen to All Might. So Izuku will do whatever it takes to protect his hero. Even if he has to burn himself down. All Might. Toshinori turns his head towards young Midoriya. They're taking a short break at the moment, and he must say he's impressed. Toshinori himself knows more than anyone that the training plan he set up is grueling, if not downright harsh. But this bright boy has never complained or shied away even once. He can't help but smile at the child. He's stubbornly wearing a long-sleeved shirt and pants again even in the summer sun, though today his hair isn't in its usual half-bun. Instead, Midoriya has gathered all his dark hair into a low ponytail. Stray locks have fallen out of the tie, curling around his flushed face, and the ends of his bushy ponytail peek out over his shoulders. He's adorable, Toshinori confirms solemnly with a decisive nod. If the usual half-bun had looked like the small fluffy tuft of a rabbit's tail, then this ponytail reminds him of something bushier. The tail of some kind of dog? Yes, but which? Toshinori peers down at the boy, concentrating so hard that he doesn't notice the bemused expression on his subject of study. All me? A Pomeranian. Toshinori bursts out triumphantly, and young Midoriya jumps, slightly with a bewildered look. What? Toshinori blinks, then grins, rubbing the back of his neck sheepishly. Ah, my apologies. I'm afraid I lost myself in thought. What was it you wanted to say, my boy? And there's that little spasm. Toshinori has noticed that Midoriya tended to do that from time to time, usually at the phrase, my boy. He's not quite sure as to why. Perhaps this endearment puts his fanboy heart into overdrive? But Midoriya smiles shyly at him before Toshinori can ask, and his heart melts a little at the boy's expression. Like he said, adorable. I wanted to ask you a question if it's not too much of a bother. Toshinori smiles down at the boy. Your hesitation is endearing. The boy lets out a little eep, an embarrassed but pleased blush spreading across his face. But we've got to work on your self-confidence. Of course you can ask me a question. Midoriya smiles with tentative gratefulness, then looks down at his own hands with a slight frown. It's not that I don't trust your judgment, he starts carefully. But are you sure that it's best to pass on one for all to me as soon as my body is ready? Toshinori spits out blood. Well, whatever he had been expecting, it certainly wasn't that. Why do you say that? I would have thought you'd be anxious to inherit it. And Toshinori is truly confused because young Midoriya has been nothing but eager and willing in his training. It's just, the boy takes a breath. If I get one for all as soon as my body is physically capable of hosting it, I won't be able to use it. Even if I inherit your quirk, I won't automatically inherit your position as the #1 hero and symbol of peace as well. I'll be little more than a glorified vessel. Midoriya lifts his head now and looks straight at Toshinori. But people need the symbol of peace. People need the beacon of hope. People need you, not me. So please, keep one for all for as long as you need to, and only pass it on to me when you can't contain it anymore. I can wait. I can be an insurance and protect you and your legacy. But empowering me means weakening you, and I don't want. I can't do that. And the boy says this, meeting Toshinori's sunken wide eyes, his gaze unwavering, his voice firm. He's serious, Toshinori realizes. Worse, he's sincere. He's sincerely giving up his best chance to fulfill his dream for the good of others, is casually dismissing himself, and urging Toshinori to prioritize All Might's name over his own dreams. Part of Toshinori is touched at the boy's words because it has been years since anyone had said they'll protect him, but another part of him twists in horror at the casual disregard the boy points to himself. Selflessness and bravery is the reason Toshinori chose Midoriya, but there is a point where even the best qualities turn into a vice. Toshinori places his hands on either side of Midoriya's shoulders. He stoops to look the boy in the eye and wills him to feel the truth in his words. Midoriya, my boy, you are not a backup plan. He freezes, eyes wide. Toshinori's heart aches because that's just proof that he'd hit home, but he continues, still keeping eye contact. It's true that you may not be able to fully wield one for all as soon as you receive it. But that's the point. The point is to train you so that you become ready to take my place. You are not a backup plan, but the plan. You are not a spare, or a second choice, or an insurance, or merely a vessel. You are the one. And you will be the number one hero. Toshinori pauses, looking down into the wide eyes of Midoriya. That is, only if you yourself do your best, of course. Will you? Midoriya's eyes are suspiciously bright, but he swallows and whispers, yes. He shakes his head, blinking a few times, and meets Toshinori's gaze again with a look that's less lost and more determined. Yes, he says firmly. Toshinori grins. Good. And stop selling yourself short, my boy. Humbleness and low self-worth are not the same things. Remember, you've already saved me. All I did was try to protect Bakugo, and in the end, I couldn't even do that, Midoriya protests, a thoroughly bemused look on his face. Toshinori chuckles. The day we first met, your deeds are what spurred me into action. You kept me from becoming a sorry excuse that's all talk. You reminded me what it is to be a true hero. You saved me. Toshinori gently taps the boy's chest, right over his heart. Protecting someone from bodily harm isn't all there is to being a hero. You have to look here too in order to truly save them. And you, my boy, have already saved me. So don't ever let yourself believe that you're not a hero. It's one of his better speeches, if Toshinori would say so himself. And believe him, he's given a lot of speeches. But for some reason, young Midoriya looks like he's ready to cry. I'm home, Mom. Welcome back, darling. Inko's reply comes from the kitchen, her voice soft by habit even after all these years. Izuku quietly makes his way towards her. He stops by the kitchen entrance and wordlessly watches his mother work. She has her dark green hair up in its usual half-do. Her form has slowly filled out ever since Hisashi left, and she has actually been able to eat when and what she pleases, and has a pink apron thrown on top of herself at the moment. She looks so peaceful and happy, and it's because Hisashi isn't here anymore. It has nothing to do with what Izuku did. Izuku remembers his 3-4-year-old self smiling at her after the first time he took a beating for her. I protected you, he had said, smiling with elation and pride. But Inko had responded with a sob. I'm sorry, she had cried. I'm so sorry, Izuku. He had already known something was wrong then. Izuku can't regret having protected his mother, but All Might has just driven home that protecting her has never been enough. Izuku has never been enough. His back burns. Inko turns around, smiling softly at the sight of her son wordlessly watching her with unreadable eyes. Yes, dear. Izuku takes in a long breath. Did I hurt you? Did I end up hurting you even more than you already were? What should I have done? How could I have saved you? Why did you say you were sorry? Why did you cry? But it's nothing. The months fly by, and before he knows it, Izuku has left the newly cleaned up beach, inherited one for all, eat this, and is now at the practical part of UA's entrance exam. He has to take down as many robots as he can within the allotted time, which is a feat that can't be done without utilizing a quirk. But Izuku has never been quirkless, regardless of what Bakugo said or he himself wished. And right now, what Izuku wants has nothing on what he needs to do. Even though he's received one for all this morning, Izuku knows he can't use it yet without his limbs going to borrow All Might's expression, kaboom. But he's known this since he started training. He's planned accordingly. Quirk analysis has been Izuku's specialty out of necessity. First he started studying quirks frantically in an attempt to find a way to suppress his fire, then in desperation when he found out his quirk was a double-edged sword, and finally in resignation to find a way to be a hero without using his quirk. From what Izuku has analyzed about One for All, it stockpiles and passes on each wielder's power. But in essence, it's an enhancement quirk. With a power like that, enhancing your physical body seems like the obvious choice. But Izuku can't do that yet. So what if he enhances his quirk instead? As if on cue, a robot comes screeching around the corner towards Izuku. It's only a one-point bot, yet it still towers over him, easily larger and heavier than anything Izuku has ever been able to pull before. But he plants his feet, reaches out a hand and pulls. The robot comes flying with surprising speed. It would have crushed Izuku if he hadn't purposefully maneuvered and put a sturdy-looking lamppost between them beforehand. The force of the robot crashing into it causes the top of the lamppost to snap, and the jagged edge impales the hunk of metal. Izuku doesn't even have the luxury to watch his handiwork, though, because already his fire is building up pressure, clamoring to be let out, howling and clawing like a wild beast. Let it out, a poisonous voice breathes in his ear. You know how strong fire is. A ghostly touch brushes over his shoulder blades, over his scars. Izuku grits his teeth. No, he tells it. I won't use it because I know exactly how strong, how destructive it is. I will never be like you. The buildup is a physical pain now. Just as One for All has enhanced the pull, the push part of his quirk seems to have strengthened as well. Izuku clamps down on it, forcing it as small as he can manage. He's yet to let it out, though, and it feels like holding his breath, like he's slowly suffocating, but he can't just let loose a random blaze of fire when other students are moving erratically around him and someone can get hurt. And Izuku hates it, but the perfect solution comes to mind. He clamps a hand over his mouth and lets out the tiniest flame he can manage. Fire comes spilling out of his mouth like coughing up blood, but it's blocked by his palm before it can break free into the world. His throat burns, but he knows it's less actual physical pain and more psychological at the thought that he's breathing fire the same way Hisashi used to. A few more fiery coughs rack Izuku's body, but they're over soon enough and he's able to take his hand away and straighten his back. His palm is smoking and red, but it's a second-degree burn at most. He can ignore the pain. It's not like he hasn't had worse, after all. Izuku looks from his red palm to the impaled robot. Okay, he whispers shakily, I can do this. Izuku may hate his fire and hate breathing fire even more, but if it gives him a way to use his pull while not harming others, he'll take it. His father's quirk hurts people. His mother's quirk might be able to protect people. Just like he promised when he was 4, Izuku can do this with just his mother's power. He can become a hero with just his mother's power. The fire may be an unfortunate side effect, but he won't actively use it. He won't let it control him. He won't let it hurt anyone but him. Okay, he repeats, swiping the back of his hand over his mouth. Izuku squares his shoulders and takes off running. Izuku quickly forms a pattern. Find a robot, pull it so it goes crashing into the side of a building or even another robot if he's lucky, cough up flames into his hand like All Might coughs up blood, then take off again. The amount of fire Izuku is letting push out of him is minuscule compared to the amount he's pulling, and the strain makes itself known. It feels like taking in a long breath and letting out only a quick, short gasp. It leaves him feeling breathless and panting, but it works. Thanks to the power boost One for All grants his pull, he can manage. He even has somewhat of an advantage because as long as Izuku can spot a robot, he can pull and destroy it before anyone else gets to it. Things seem to be going well. Which is, of course, the precise moment everything goes wrong. A commotion breaks out somewhere behind Izuku, and he turns to find a skyscraper on wheels. Izuku gapes for a moment. That's the zero-pointer? Are you FNG serious? And is about to make a run for it when he spots a girl crumpled on the ground, right in the path of the zero-pointer. And Izuku doesn't know this girl. He's never seen her or talked to her, or even noticed her before. But the moment he sees the tears in her eyes, there's only one thing he can do. He steps between them. Izuku's mind is in overdrive. Pulling the girl towards him will maybe buy them a few seconds, but ultimately it will be no use since the zero-pointer will still be after them. If Izuku wants to save this girl, he has to stop the robot. Izuku flings his arms straight up towards the head of the robot towering above him and pulls, hoping to embed its head in the ground. But either his pull isn't strong enough even with one for all, or he just doesn't have good enough control over it yet, because instead of the robot's head being pulled towards him, he is pulled towards it. He has just enough time to think oh shit as he rockets through the air before he's face to giant face with the zero-pointer. Again, Izuku's mind is in overdrive. He can already feel the flame building up inside him, but what can a little fire do to a humongous hunk of metal? Neither his pull or his push will be of any use here. That leaves only one option. And if his limbs do go kaboom, well, All Might himself did say that a hero has to push through his own pain for the sake of others. And Izuku is more than familiar with pain. Izuku draws back a fist before gravity takes hold of him. One for all envelopes his right arm like green lightning, crackling with raw power. Clench your buttocks and scream from the bottom of your heart. All Might's voice rings in his ears, and despite the situation, Izuku bares his teeth in a grin. Smash! The robot's face folds into itself, and it crumples like pressed garbage. Izuku feels a whoop of elation before gravity finally takes hold of him, and he starts falling after the downed robot. Oh shit, he thinks again, mind once more going in overdrive. Quick think. He's shattered his right arm from that smash and it's flopping uselessly at his side now, but he still has another arm and 2 legs left. He could try breaking his fall with another smash. But if he's even a moment too soon or late, he's done for. Then what else? Oh shit. He has a solution, and his quirk is not going to be happy about it. Izuku hasn't even pushed out the fire that his initial pull cost him, so pulling again will make the backlash a beach, but it's the best plan he has right now. From his initial move, Izuku now knows that trying to pull something greater than his capacity makes him shoot towards it, giving him mobility that he didn't have before. Pulling again without pushing is going to come back to bite him in the butt, but he can do it. Probably. Izuku reaches out his left hand to the falling zero-point bot and pulls. His free fall is broken as his body is whipped towards the zero-pointer's head. He smacks against it feet first, skidding a bit until he gains balance on the falling robot, and hangs on with one arm while it crashes to the ground. Izuku rides it like a surfboard, letting the giant hunk of metal absorb most of the impact. He grits his teeth as the shockwaves make his shattered arm wave wildly in the wind like a piece of cloth, but otherwise he's unharmed. The dust finally settles, and Izuku stands up on top of the fallen zero-pointer's head. He spots the girl he tried to protect floating on top of a piece of metal nearby. She has a hand stretched out in his direction as if she was trying to reach him. Their eyes meet. "Are you okay?" they ask at the same time. They blink, then start laughing together. And continuing their synchronization, they both start puking at the exact same moment too. The girl drops from the air and throws up on the ground. Izuku doubles over as he retches and flames come spilling out of his mouth. He doesn't know why, but he actually feels physically sick. The flames burn his throat and his palm, harsher and far more intense from having been kept back for so long. Izuku drops to his knees and clamps his good hand over his mouth in a desperate attempt to keep the volatile flames to himself so that they won't hurt anyone. He heaves, violent bursts of fire racking his body as it pushes out of him forcefully with vengeance. He'd been right. The backlash is a beach. When the side effect finally runs its course and subdues, Izuku is left shaking and shivering. So when Present Mike announces the end of the test, it's almost a relief. Plus make plus. All Might pukes blood. Izuku pukes fire. Uraraka just plain pukes. Welcome to the Puke Club, otherwise known as the Bile Band or the Thrower Uppers. A week after the practical exams finds Izuku discreetly swiping the envelope from UA and stealing into his room before his mother can see it. He hasn't told Inko that he'd applied to UA yet, not wanting to get her hopes up only to chance disappointing her. If he gets in, she's in for a, hopefully, pleasant surprise. If he doesn't, Izuku will be the only one who has to deal with the disappointment. What Inko doesn't know can't hurt her. He tears the envelope and a small round device falls out, letting loose a hologram with All Might's unmistakable face filling the entire screen. Izuku's heart simultaneously jumps to his throat and sinks to his gut at the sight of his hero. Oh shit. Izuku had known that whoever was grading the practical exam would see him use his quirk from the many cameras he's sure were littered around the arena. He was okay with the staff of UA seeing his quirk, but he'd never banked on All Might being a part of that panel and seeing his quirk too. During the months they trained, All Might had never once brought up Izuku's inherited quirk. Maybe he hadn't noticed Izuku use it against the slime villain, or maybe training for One for All was just too urgent that he never got around to it. Izuku doesn't know. He'd been too relieved to ask. But now that All Might has presumably seen him throw around and throw up, his quirk left and right, he's bound to ask about it. That is not a conversation Izuku is looking forward to. For the moment, though, All Might's projection thankfully makes no comment on that particular subject as he buoyantly runs through Izuku's results. You did fine on the written test, and at the practical you earned a decent score of 40 points. But wait, there's more. Behold this screen. And another screen pops up behind All Might, who's also in a screen, so. How many walls is this breaking? But Izuku's dry musings are cut short when he sees the familiar face of the girl he'd protected from the 0-point bot. Sorry to bother you, but do you know the boy with greenish black hair? He tied it back in a half bun, and he looks, kinda like a bunny. Do you know who I'm talking about? And no, Izuku doesn't know, because a bunny? Is that supposed to be him? How? But despite his utter confusion, the girl continues on. Would it be possible to share some of my points with him? At that, Izuku freezes. The girl gives a sheepish smile, rubbing the back of her neck with 4 fingers. I mean, he was strong enough to take down that giant robot, and he didn't even need my help landing from the fall, so I guess someone like that might already have enough points. But I still want to do something to say thank you. The girl looks up into the camera, and her bright eyes are earnestly honest. He saved me. And those words sound like salvation to his ears. Izuku muffles a strangled gasp against the back of his hand. He saved me, she had said. She said he saved her, not just protected her. She thanked him, not apologized to him. I'm so sorry, the memory of a broken sob whispers in his mind. But thank you, says the voice of another, not loud enough to drown out the sobs. Entirely but enough to keep Izuku afloat. He clutches a hand over his heart that hurts so much but feels so good. All Might smiles at him kindly through the screen. More than anything, it is your actions that have touched people. He explains the concept of rescue points, showing a multitude of raised numbers. So take your 60 rescue points, and combined with your 40 combat points, that brings you up to a whopping 100 points. All Might grins, extending one hand. Come, Midoriya, my boy. This is your hero academia. And for once, Izuku is able to smile back instantly at the phrase, my boy. Later that night, Izuku heads over to the Dagoba seaside park. He finds All Might's skeletal form gazing over the cleared beach and sea, the sand and waves reflecting moonlight with a soft glow. A surge of pride fills him. This beach is yet another thing that Izuku has managed to grasp without breaking it. The emotional high from seeing the acceptance letter and hearing the girl's thanks is only bolstered further by the sight of his hero gazing peacefully at the beautiful scenery that Izuku himself wrought with his own hands. All Might. Despite his soft voice, the man jumps and spins around violently. Goodness, young Midoriya. You sure know how to move quietly. Izuku blinks. Treading lightly to the point of having almost no presence is a skill both he and Inko had unconsciously learned in a desperate attempt to avoid Hisashi's notice and beating for as long as possible. Unless Hisashi was beating Inko. Then Izuku would make himself known. He hadn't noticed it at home because both he and his mother were so used to it, but it seems even a decade hasn't been enough to erase the habit. Before he can stutter an apology, All Might grins brightly at him and holds out a hand. Never mind that now. Congratulations on passing, and in first place too. I hear that it's been years since anyone has passed with a triple-digit score. Izuku flushes, both at the praise and at the fact that he's just high-fived All Might. Oh my god, he feels like he's shooting straight to heaven. The way you utilized one for all and your own quirk was quite impressive, although they both seem to have unfortunate side effects. We haven't had time to talk about your natural quirk, let alone one for all, but you use some kind of telekinesis, right? And Izuku comes crashing back down to earth. All Might is looking at Izuku expectantly with raised brows, asking for an explanation without blatantly pressuring him. But of course he feels pressure. Izuku would never lie to his hero. But that doesn't mean he can just go on and say, yeah, so, my quirk also forces me to push out fire, which I inherited from my abusive father who used it to hurt me and my mother, giving us pyrophobia for a while. Not to mention that when I first used it my mother screamed, so I swore never to use it consciously. Oh, and did I mention that it scarred me for life too? That's just you just don't do that. Even if, or perhaps all the more because All Might is his hero, Izuku isn't going to shove his baggage down the man's throat. It's not really telekinesis, he starts hesitantly. I can only pull things in the direction towards myself, and as you've probably seen, it forces out a bit of fire as a backlash. Stick to the facts, he tells himself, desperately trying to keep his cool. This is the first time in, well, ever that he's talking about his quirk to someone, and it feels strange to the point of being surreal. Stop right there. You were throwing up fire? All Might asks incredulously. Izuku blinks. If All Might hadn't noticed any flames coming out of his mouth, then it looks like he'd been able to keep it to himself better than he'd thought. The man is gaping at Izuku now like he's the most outrageous thing he's ever seen. You were vomiting fire. Then your hand. You kept it over your mouth. Does your own fire burn you? Izuku waves his arms frantically at All Might's worry, showing his fully healed left palm. Recovery Girl had literally kissed it better along with his right arm that had been shattered from One for All, so there isn't any trace of the burn right now. It doesn't burn me all the time, he says quickly to pacify All Might, and it's true. No matter how high Izuku's pain tolerance is, if he'd been burned every time he used his quirk, his hand would have been little more than a smoldering stump by the time the practical exam ended. And as for his mouth, fire has never burned his mouth. Just like it never burned Hisashi when he breathed fire too. It's one of the reasons the idea of breathing fire out of his mouth had come so readily to Izuku. Because he'd known it wouldn't burn. Izuku stills his hands and looks down at them. I'm not sure why sometimes it burns me and sometimes it doesn't. Maybe it's just random. I haven't used my quirk much before, so I don't know too much about it either. I just figured it would be worth giving a shot, now that I'm enhanced with One for All. All Might is still looking at Izuku like he's grown a second head or something. Still, if it burns you. He shrugs. Well, it was either that or shatter all my limbs, he points out, and the man finally stops giving him the look and sheepishly rubs the back of his neck. Pious. You have a point, I suppose. He coughs, though thankfully he doesn't cough up blood this time. Well, I can see why you would have been reluctant to use a quirk like that. The pain isn't the reason, but Izuku doesn't correct him. Tashinori and young Midoriya are chatting and relaxing at the moonlit beach when Tashinori blinks down at the package the boy brought with him. By the way, what did you bring? He asks curiously. He can't help it. The small packet is wrapped in All Might printed wrapping paper, after all. Oh, the boy jumps, scrambling to pick up the packet. He hesitates for a moment before holding it out to his mentor. It's actually for you, he says, blushing a bit. It's a thank you gift for everything. I didn't have much time to prepare, so it's not much, and I'm not sure you'd even like it, but... And as adorable as it is, Tashinori puts a hand on Midoriya's shoulder, effectively cutting off his rambling. My boy, he says, and there's a fond affection in his voice again that he can't help. Whatever it is, I'm sure I'll love it. Thank you. Well, technically it's my thank you to you, But, Midoriya mumbles embarrassedly, then shoves the package into Toshinori's waiting hands as if to cut himself off before he can say anything more. Toshinori carefully tears the wrapping paper that has his own face printed all over it, and out comes a small, white, fluffy stuffed animal, just a little larger than the size of his fist, in his true form. He's a little taken back at first because while he doesn't dislike it, it seems a little out of the blue. But then he realizes what animal it is and chokes. Young Midoriya is fidgeting nervously. You never really talked about what you like in your interviews, so I didn't, I don't know what kind of food you like, and didn't want to get you something that you don't or can't eat. And you mentioned this one time, so I guessed you might like it? And the boy jumps then smiles tentatively as Toshinori laughs delightedly, cupping the stuffed animal in his hands. It's a Pomeranian. A Pomeranian. The man chokes on his laughter, holding the small doll to his chest. Oh God, he's laughing so much he has tears in his eyes, and that hasn't happened in ages. This child is priceless. I like bunny rabbits too, he tells the boy through his laughter, eyeing the small tuft of green hair that looks so much like a rabbit's tail. It's obvious from Midoriya's bewildered expression that he has no clue whatsoever why Toshinori is laughing so much, and it makes the situation all the more adorable. Come to think of it, that girl from the practical exam had also described Midoriya's bun as a rabbit's tail too, hadn't she? What was it she said? He looks kinda like a bunny, was it? Toshinori laughs. The next time they meet, young Midoriya gives him another wrapped gift. It's a small, white, fluffy stuffed animal again. But this time, it's a rabbit. Toshinori laughs so hard that he straight up starts puking blood and has to hold up the bunny over his head as he vomits in order to not get blood on it. But oh, is it worth it? Even with blood in his mouth and Midoriya fussing over him, Toshinori smiles. He wonders if this is the joy of having a child. Izuku's high school year begins by being accosted at the front door of Class 1A by a tall spectacled boy. Hello, I am Ida Tenya from Somei Junior High School, he says, gesturing wildly in Izuku's face. Izuku thinks he vaguely remembers him zooming around in the same arena during the practical exams. Midoriya, wait, he knows his name? I must hand it to you. You divined the actual nature of the practical exam, didn't you? I was blind to it and you came in first place. I hate to admit it, but you were the better man. And thanks to Ida's remark about Izuku coming in first place, now everyone in the class is looking at him, including Bakugo, whose look is more of a murderous glare. Thankfully Izuku is saved from having to say anything and disrupt the sudden silence himself when the very girl he met at the exam comes in. Ah! She exclaims happily as she steps inside the classroom behind Izuku. It's you, bunny hair guy. And just what? Bunny hair guy? How? Izuku stares blankly at her as the girl practically radiates happiness. I'm so glad to see you. I wanted to say thank you in person. That shakes Izuku out of his blank disbelief. I heard that you tried to share your points with me, he says softly. And then he smiles at her. Thank you. The girl looks taken back at Izuku's expression for a moment, perhaps not expecting the sheer sincerity in it. But soon she beams back. I was trying to thank you, silly, she laughs. But no, Izuku isn't just thanking her for the points. He's thanking her for her words, for her smile. She had proved to him that he can be a hero that saves people's hearts, not just protect them from physical wounds while leaving their hearts shattered on the ground. She has shown him salvation. Before he can find a way to articulate that into words, someone else cuts in. If you want to go hunting for friends, do it elsewhere. A voice drifts up from the ground behind the girl. Izuku turns his head towards the chronically tired voice and sees a giant caterpillar a sleeping bag, he belatedly realizes. He looks at the face poking out of the dull yellow folds to find. Eraserhead, he sputters. The man blinks up at him from the ground. But that's Aizawa-sensei to you, the hero says, still blinking slowly on the ground. Got anything to say? Izuku wonders for a wild moment if he can get away with saying, I've had your face taped to my wall for the past decade. Probably not. Izuku is a hardcore fan of heroes and quirks in general, but there have only ever been two individuals he would call my hero, even in the confines of his own mind. The first is, of course, All Might. The symbol of peace, the beacon of hope, the #1 hero. The one who gave him the courage to step between people like Hisashi or Bakugo and their victims, the one who taught him to keep getting up, and the one who, now, is his mentor. The only other hero who's been elevated to that same pedestal had gotten and stayed there since the moment Izuku and Inko watched Hisashi's arrest on TV. Izuku had followed Eraserhead's career as religiously as All Might's, so he'd known that the hero is a teacher in UA. It had been another reason he was desperate to get in this school, after all. But knowing that isn't the same thing as actually meeting his hero and finding out he's their homeroom teacher. Izuku follows Eraserhead's Aizawa's instructions to change to their P uniforms in a daze. He notices in the back of his mind that while the other sleeves only come down to their elbows, save for a few whose bodies don't allow for sleeves in the first place, Izuku's own P uniform has long sleeves that come all the way down to his wrists, just like he'd requested. The quirk assessment test that follows is just barely enough to shake Izuku out of his daze. Izuku has never really used his quirk at all, let alone in a test, before the UA entrance exam. Already he's at a disadvantage to his other classmates who have been living and training with their quirks for their entire lives. Izuku, on the other hand, is almost as foreign with his own quirk as with One for All. Almost being the key word. Thanks to the fiasco with the zero-pointer, Izuku now knows that with his One for All enhanced pull, he can pull himself towards things with surprising force. Landing is going to be hard because he has nothing to counteract the pull, not to mention he's going to have to puke fire into his hand again to keep it to himself and not burn any of his classmates, but it's better than nothing. For the 50-meter dash and the standing long jump, Izuku pulls himself towards whatever building is on the other side of the track. He lets go of the pull as soon as he's cleared the finish line and has to wildly skid forward a few meters before the momentum dies. Then he's coughing flames into his hand again. For the grip test, he just pulls the grip toward him. And, of course, vomits fire again. The hardest actually turns out to be the sustained sideways jump. He tries pulling himself towards the school building on the left, then the gym on the right, then back again to the left and so on in quick succession. But as he'd already proved in the practical exam, using his pull repeatedly without paying the price of the push only makes it build up until it's a physical pain and the backlash is downright punishing. Izuku ends up having to stop halfway through the exercise to drop to his knees and retch, a hand clasped desperately over his mouth as his whole body shakes with the force of his heaving. He ends up in last place for the sideways jump. Some of his classmates worry for him and ask if he's alright. Izuku just wipes his mouth on his sleeve and stands up with a shaky smile. Luckily or unluckily, depending on how you look at it, Izuku's quirk isn't of any help in the endurance running or the seated toe touch. So he just does it normally without a quirk and takes the opportunity to take a breather. By the time the last event comes around, Izuku feels better. His left palm is burned again, but it doesn't matter since he'll be using his right hand for the ball pitch. His pull isn't going to be of any help here either. Maybe he can use his fire to push, like Bakugo used his explosions, but no. Izuku squashes that thought before it can progress further. He will not actively use his fire. It may be an unfortunate part of his quirk, but he's going to use his mother's and All Might's quirk to become a hero. Never his father's. Izuku quickly does the math in his head. So far, his results are decent. He did place dead last in the sustained sideways jump, but in all the others he is usually at the top 10, if not the top 5. As long as he doesn't drop the ball at his feet, he'll be safe from expulsion at least. His name is called for the ball pitch. Izuku takes in a breath and steps forward. Aizawa knows the look of pure awe and unadulterated admiration. He's met plenty of other heroes and even works with well-known heroes as colleagues. After all, he's seen it often enough in the faces of students, mostly pointed to Midnight and even present Mike. So yes, he knows what it looks like. He's just never had it pointed at him. And that's not all. Not to mention that he recognized Aizawa as Eraserhead at first sight. But the look Midoriya Izuku gives him isn't just flimsy hero worship or even vague admiration. It's almost reverent. And Aizawa has no idea how to deal with that. So he ignores it. What he isn't going to ignore, though, is Midoriya's quirk. The kid has an undeniably useful quirk that can be versatile with the right imagination and application, as he's proved both in the entrance exams and this quirk assessment test. But the problem is that it comes at a cost. Every time the kid uses his quirk, he has to double over and clamp a hand tightly over his mouth as he coughs violently. It's not uncommon for quirks to have downsides. Uraraka threw up at the end of the practical exam. Aoyama can only use his laser for 1 second at a time, and even Aizawa himself suffers from dry eye. So while Midoriya's quirk has drawbacks, quirks can be trained, just like muscles. The kid himself has potential and resolve, so Aizawa is betting that with the proper training he'll manage. His potential is not zero, that's for sure. He doesn't warrant an expulsion, but an early warning might be in place. As Midoriya prepares his first ball pitch, Aizawa reaches into a deep pocket in his jumpsuit and pulls out a small bouncy ball. As soon as Midoriya throws the ball, Aizawa erases his quirk and tosses his bouncy ball at him simultaneously. Midoriya shows impressive situational awareness and reflexes when his left hand, palm red with at least a first, if not a second-degree burn, Aizawa notes, comes flying up to snatch it out of the air before it can hit his head, even as the softball he'd thrown lands a meager 46 meters. He turns to look at Aizawa in confusion, although there's still that underlying layer of sheer admiration and reverence in his gaze. Aizawa does his best to ignore it as he points at the bouncy ball in the kid's hand. "I erased your quirk," he says, not knowing that Midoriya never planned to use it at the ball pitch in the first place anyway. "I've noticed the side effect of your quirk. If you used your quirk just now, you would have been too busy throwing up to catch that. And if that ball was a bomb, you'd be dead. Not to mention that you had to drop out halfway through the side jump because of your backlash. If it was a real situation, you'd be doubly dead." He looks the kid in the eye. "A villain isn't going to politely wait for you. They'll beat you while you're down. If you want to become a hero, you're going to have to figure out a way around your limits before they get you killed." Aizawa beckons with a hand, and Midoriya hesitates before gently tossing the bouncy ball back at him. He plucks it out of the air and nods to the pile of softballs. "Keep that in mind, kid, if you don't want to die. Now, I gave you back your quirk. Hurry up and do your second ball pitch." Midoriya hesitates though, bowing his head with the ball in his hand as if thinking. From what Aizawa has gathered, his quirk seems to be some kind of telekinesis. Now that he has his quirk again, he would probably use it to enhance his throw. Aizawa isn't going to erase his quirk this time. He's just going to toss the bouncy ball at Midoriya's head while he's busy throwing up and make another dry remark about how that would have killed him in a real situation, just to drive home that he needs to refine his quirk. Midoriya finally raises his head with a determined look. He steps forward, drawing back his arm, and Aizawa readies his bouncy ball. But contrary to his expectation, Midoriya doesn't use his telekinesis. Instead, he seems to pool raw power into a single fingertip that he uses to smash the ball into the air at the last possible second. Midoriya catches the bouncy ball deftly with a smack, not a hint of the violent coughing fit to be seen. His right forefinger is swollen and broken, but the kid doesn't even seem to notice the pain as he curls his hand into a victorious fist. He turns towards Aizawa and bares his teeth in a grin. "I'm not dead yet, sensei," he says, brandishing the bouncy ball in his left hand. And Aizawa didn't expect it from the previously quiet and polite kid, but that grin is downright savage. 705.3 meters, the device beeps and informs him. Aizawa stares at the kid, but then he grins right back. Izuku comes home after having his right index finger and left palm healed by Recovery Girl. He'd also been thoroughly chastised for coming to see her on the first day of class. "Not that I don't think you're sweet, dear, but this had better not become a pattern." Inko is waiting for him with a package wrapped in All Might printed wrapping paper. "It was in front of our door," she says softly, wringing her hands. "It doesn't say who it's from, so I was worried." But Izuku recognizes that wrapping paper. "It's okay, Mom. I think it's for me." It's the same wrapping paper he'd used to wrap All Might's thank you gift. He brings the box into his room and away from Inko, just in case it isn't from who he thinks it is and actually turns out to be dangerous. He opens the box, and an All Might card greets him. First, he flips it open to find solid bold writing. "Dear young Midoriya, I was watching the quirk assessment test. Good work, both with your own quirk and with Hernsing, you know. This is just a little thumbs up encouragement, and also congratulations on officially getting through your first day at UA. Keep up the good work. The card isn't signed, but Izuku knows exactly who it's from. He smiles and sets the card carefully on his dresser. He also pulls out the yellow bouncy ball Aizawa had thrown at him, he had asked, and the hero had given him a look for a moment that felt like an eternity before allowing him to keep it from his pocket and puts it beside the card. Then he shifts his attention to the other contents of the box. He finds 2 plushies, both about the size of his head. One is a Pomeranian. The other is a bunny. They both have fluffy tails. And they're both very, very green. Tashinori, as All Might, first officially meets Class 1A on the second day of school. He comes in for their foundational hero studies class, namely the trial of battle, and tells them all to gear up in their hero costumes. He's in the process of complimenting everyone's costumes when he chances a glance at Midoriya and promptly does a spit take. Young Midoriya's costume is a green jumpsuit with a sturdy white mask covering his lower face, completed by a hood with 2 appendages sticking straight up. Some small part of Tashinori recognizes that it must be a tribute to his own tufts of hair. But the rest of him is caught up at the sight of Midoriya's half-bun poking out of the back of his hood like a fluffy tail and the 2 appendages waving in the air like ears. There's no denying it. With his bunny ears and fluffy tail hair, young Midoriya looks exactly like a green rabbit now. And judging by his face, he has no clue. This child is priceless. Tashinori turns his back to the class and stuffs his fist into his mouth in a desperate attempt to choke down his laughter. His only saving grace is that his students are too busy gawking at UA's extensive facilities to notice that the symbol of peace is shaking pathetically in the corner. While most of his students, Tashinori notices that young Uraraka has a hand over her mouth and her eyes are practically shining as she stares at Midoriya's costume and hair with something akin to delighted awe. He has a feeling she's seeing the same thing he is. Izuku watches worriedly as All Might explains the combat simulation. Until just a moment ago, All Might had his back turned to the class, a hand over his mouth while shaking uncontrollably. Thankfully, no one other than Izuku seems to have noticed, but he's worried that the hero might be overdoing it. The fact that there doesn't seem to be any blood coughed up at least soothes his worry a little. Sir. Ida raises his hand after All Might explains the exercise. How will we form pairs when we have an odd number of students? A hush falls upon the class as everyone is reminded of yesterday. True to his word, Aizawa had expelled the lowest-ranking student on the spot, who happened to be Mineta Minoru. It had only been the first day of class, so no one really knew each other yet, and what little they had seen of Mineta hadn't been all that complimentary, but it was still jarring to see the expulsion of a fellow classmate on the first day. All Might attempts to expel the gloom by beaming his signature smile. You have a point, young Ida. It will simply be that some teams have extra members. That doesn't sound really fair, Ribbit. Nonsense. Of course it isn't. But life isn't fair, Yumbayos. And it certainly isn't kind, Izuku thinks as he eyes the matchups. Hero team, Midoriya and Uraraka versus villain team, Bakugo and Ida. Izuku's eyes unconsciously travel across their assembled classmates to find Bakugo. The other boy is already looking at him, red eyes burning amidst the black of the mask he has over his eyes. Their eyes meet. Not a single word passes between them. Izuku is 5 years old, and he and Inko have just moved away from their old town as if trying to flee the very memory of Hisashi. They're quietly walking home after getting the groceries when a bright, strong voice calls out to them. Oh, Private. I didn't know there was anyone else around here with a munchkin of their own. The 2 Midoriyas turn to find a woman with red eyes and ashy blonde hair smiling at them with her own bag of groceries and miniature replica. Just as any passerby would look at Inko and Izuku and know they're mother and son, Izuku and Inko look at the pair and instantly know that they are mother and son. Oh, Inko starts nervously. We just moved in today, you see. The woman beams. Welcome. I'm Bakugo Mitsuki, and this midget here is my Katsuki. She smiles, pushing down her boy's head in a bow with her hand without even looking at him. The boy looks disgruntled but used to it. There's an easy dynamic there, born through familiarity and affection, something that Inko and Izuku have been too cautious to dare have. I'm me, Midoriya Inko, and this is Izuku, Inko manages instead. Hisashi is still too fresh in Inko's mind for her to be anything less than a jittery mess, but Mitsuki doesn't seem to mind as she smiles brightly. It's a pleasure. Say, do you want to chat for a bit? It's not every day I get to meet someone my age around here. I'll fill you in on all the gossip around town. Katsuki can show Izuku-kun the playground in the meantime. Inko looks down at Izuku with a lost expression. Izuku meets her eyes, then looks across at Bakugo Mitsuki for a long moment as if sizing her up. Eventually, Izuku slips his hand out of Inko's and takes a step away. He smiles up at her. It'll be okay, Mom, he says. Go have fun. Inko looks so incredibly lost for a moment when her son says words that usually a mother should say to her son. But she is saved from having to make a reply when Mitsuki happily claps her. Alright, come on then, Inko, can I call you Inko? Katsuki, you take care of Izuku-kun, you hear? Yeah, the little boy grumps, but then turns to Izuku with a grin. The others should already be at the playground. Come on. Izuku's heart skips a little, and he tentatively smiles back. For the first time, he thinks he might have a friend. But of course he doesn't, because life isn't fair and it certainly isn't kind. Bakugo turns out to be fond of showing off his flashy quirk, and when Izuku clamps his mouth shut whenever he's asked what his own quirk is, the boy takes to taunting Izuku that he must be a quirkless loser and starts looking down on him. Izuku bears his taunts and cruel nickname, Deku, with silence because it's better than showing his quirk. At this point in life, all 5-year-old Izuku knows about his quirk is that he inherited the destructive fire from his father and that it made his mother scream. But when Bakugo starts bullying someone else in front of Izuku, he does the only thing he can. He steps between them. Bakugo looks astonished at first. Then he laughs with youthful cruelty. You playing it hero, Deku? You don't even have a quirk. I have a quirk, Izuku says on reflex. Yeah? Then show it. Izuku doesn't. Because he really wishes he didn't have this quirk. But his silent defiance only seems to enrage Bakugo. The boy practically fumes, and explosions crackle violently out of his palms. I said, show it, he spits, but Izuku is too frozen at the sight of the explosions that look so much like fire to even be aware of Bakugo anymore. Bakugo seems to instinctively notice that Izuku's attention isn't on him. He rectifies that by running full force at Izuku with palms blazing. Izuku makes it back home to find Inko and Mitsuki seated side by side with a plate of cookies between them. The snacks were probably brought by Mitsuki since neither Izuku or Inko had the concept of food being pleasure yet. The two women are laughing together over something, Mitsuki loud and free with her head thrown back and Inko softly and cautiously from behind her hand. But she's still laughing. Izuku stands there frozen, staring at his mother like he's never seen her before. Eventually Inko notices him, as she's more attuned to his silent presence. Oh, welcome back, darling, she says as she catches sight of him, and she's still smiling. But then Inko's eyes widen as she takes in Izuku's dirted clothes. A tinge of familiar fear enters those green eyes that had been filled with mirth just a moment ago. What happened, dear? Inko asks in a whisper. Izuku looks at his mother who's looking at him with fear, and then at the woman who had been able to make her smile and laugh. Izuku has only ever been able to make his mother worried, afraid, or cry. But Bakugo Mitsuki has managed to make her not only smile but actually laugh in just the short time they've been together, like it's easy as breathing. And as much as it hurts, he realizes then and there that he could never do anything to take that away from her. So Izuku clasps his hands behind his back to hide the burns and bruises on his arms and plasters a smile on his face. I just fell, Mom. Baku, but no, Izuku realizes with startling intellect for a 5-year-old. If he's going to sell this, he's going to have to do better than that. Kaken and I were playing in the sandbox. Sorry for the mess. It's instantly apparent that it was the right move. Inko visibly relaxes, and Mitsuki starts cooing. He lets you call him Kaken? That's so adorable. Mitsuki begins talking excitedly again with Inko smiling tentatively at her new friend. Izuku quietly backs out and heads to his own room to treat his wounds in privacy. Izuku had already made a habit of wearing long sleeves because of the numerous scars and wounds Hisashi gave him periodically. But from that moment he begins wearing long sleeves at all times. Even inside the house. Even in front of Inko. Bakugo continues picking on others to assert himself at the top of their secluded food chain. Izuku bears the bullying pointed at himself silently, but when Bakugo goes for another target, he steps between them. He never really fights back. He's never learned to fight back. Bakugo reminds Izuku so much of Hisashi, and his explosions look so much like violent fire that Izuku pretty much freezes up when confronted with them. He just gets back up in between Bakugo and his would-be victim without protest, without even a cry of pain at the bruises and minor burns. It's nothing compared to Hisashi's abuse, after all. Izuku's silent defiance somehow seems to enrage Bakugo all the more. But each time Izuku wordlessly faces down his rage and explosions, all he can think is, "You have nothing on my father." Izuku steps between Bakugo and the children he tries to bully time and again. Just like Hisashi stopped going for Inko and started coming straight for Izuku, eventually Bakugo stops trying to bully other children and just singles out Izuku for ridicule and bullying. And really, as powerful as Bakugo's quirk is, he still has nothing on Hisashi. All Izuku has known before this point is violence, after all, and bullying just pales in comparison. If this is the price Izuku has to pay so that Inko thinks they're friends and can enjoy her own new friendship with Mitsuki, then he'll put up with it. He'll gladly put up with it. So Izuku never stops following the blonde around dutifully and quietly. After all, Hisashi had taught him to step between people, to get up no matter how much fear shakes his limbs, to push aside and ignore pain. But he's never taught him how to run away. So Izuku stays by Bakugo's side. Izuku is 9, and he keeps 3 steps behind Bakugo as they both walk home. Inko has become best friends with Mitsuki, and currently the two have gone out for a dinner date so can't pick them up. Izuku is happy for his mother because now that Hisashi is gone, not only can she indulge in human contact outside their house, but Inko can finally discover the joy of eating what and when she wants with the enthusiastic help of Mitsuki. Inko has changed so much in the few years since Hisashi's arrest and their move. She's less jittery and nervous, doesn't jump at every single footstep, has filled out more, and actually smiles. She still hasn't completely gotten over her pyrophobia like Izuku has managed to, but of course, a cruel phantom breathes in Izuku's ear. How can she, when you yourself are a living reminder? No, Izuku protests faintly. I will never use your fire. I will never be like you. The phantom laughs. You know what they say, boy. Like father, like son. I'll never. Will you shut the F up, you effing nerd? Quit your mumbling. Bakugo snaps, and Izuku clicks his mouth shut. Izuku is in middle school, and this time, instead of stepping between Bakugo and his would-be victim, he steps between a slime villain and Bakugo who is his would-be victim. Later, Bakugo catches Izuku by the scruff of his neck and slams him into a wall. What the actual F-, you quirkless sheet? Where did you pull that quirk out of? All this time I tell you to show your quirk, and you only use it now. He's referring to how Izuku had pulled him out of the slim villain's grasp, Izuku realizes. Of course. Even half suffocating and scared witless, Bakugo is not an idiot. Of course he noticed. But that doesn't mean Izuku is going to explain his quirk. His fire. Because no matter if Bakugo's smoking hands are near his throat, or he's frothing right in Izuku's face, he still has nothing on Hisashi. That I never said I was quirkless, Kaken, is all he ends up saying quietly. He doesn't even flinch at the small explosions that go off near his face. He's long since gotten over his pyrophobia, after all. Bakugo himself had made sure of that. Bakugo keeps him by his collar, face twisted in rage and frustration and, "Is that hurt?" "No," he finally says. "I guess you didn't." Bakugo lets go of Izuku as if he's been burned, still looking at Izuku with those unreadable eyes. "Stop looking down on me, Deku, you arrogant beaky." And with that accusation he turns around without another word. Izuku is 15 and in UA, going through the quirk assessment test. Every time he uses his pole and violently coughs up fire into his hand in a desperate attempt to keep it back, he feels two sets of eyes on his back. One is Aizawa, who probably can't let his glaring weakness slide as a teacher. The other, though, is Bakugo, who has been glaring murderously at Izuku since Ida's comment about Izuku placing first in the practical exam. Bakugo watches Izuku's casual display of his quirk with almost frightening intensity. He doesn't say a word or approach Izuku. But his gaze burns almost more than Izuku's fire. Izuku is still 15, still in UA, and is now going up against Bakugo in their battle simulation. He and Uraraka are stationed outside the building. The villains are holed up in, waiting for the signal to proceed. For the first time, just stepping in front of Bakugo isn't going to be enough. Izuku can't just let him have his way and wait for his rage to burn out, and he can't depend on the fact that this is only a class activity for Bakugo to hold back. No, for the first time, Izuku is actually going to have to confront Bakugo. Izuku sighs, lowering his mask from his lower face to let it rest on his collarbone. Uraraka, he calls quietly, and the girl instantly focuses on him. He had caught her staring at his costume earlier as if transfixed, muttering about bunny ears and tails. But when he had asked if his costume looked weird, she had vehemently denied it. "It's perfect," she had insisted solemnly with almost frightening intensity. Izuku had no idea what was going on, but he'd been too intimidated to ask. "Yeah, Deku?" She smiles, and the way the nickname rolls off her tongue sounds so different from how he's used to hearing it. A strange half-smile comes upon Izuku's face as he thinks of the person who gave him that nickname in the first place. "Kaken. I mean, Bakugo is most likely to come after me. I can lead him away from you. Do you think you can find the nuke in the meantime?" Uraraka looks questioning. "Are you sure?" Izuku doesn't know if she's asking if he's sure that's the best course of action, or if he's sure Bakugo will come after him. Whichever it is, though, the answer is yes. The worst-case scenario for us is facing off Ida and Bakugo at the same time. Ida's speed will make both him and the nuke hard to capture, and Bakugo has raw firepower. Divide and conquer is our best strategy. And as for whether Bakugo will come after Izuku, well, like it or not, Izuku has known the boy for the past decade. He'll come. Uraraka doesn't seem to notice Izuku's grim thoughts as she claps and beams. "Oh, divide and conquer. That sounds so cool. Alright, I'll find the nuke in no time. Leave it to me." Izuku smiles back at her softly. "Can you tell me more about your quirk? We can work on a plan." The timer is up, and Izuku and Uraraka steal into the building. They part ways as soon as they get in, surprisingly easily, thanks to Uraraka's quirk letting them float in through a window, and Uraraka takes the stairs as Izuku winds around the floor, straining his ears. Not too long after, he picks up on the sound of footsteps and breathing around the corner. It looks like Bakugo has been looking for him too, probably planning on an ambush. Unfortunately for him, Izuku has spent his early childhood holding his breath and attuning his entire being to Hisashi so that he could either hide from the man or step between them when he started beating Inko. In terms of experience in this game of cat and mouse, Izuku simply outclasses Bakugo. He doubles around the corridor to find Bakugo waiting to ambush him. He creeps up silently from behind, and then Izuku ambushes him. Izuku shoots toward Bakugo with the capture tape in his hands, and Bakugo narrowly avoids getting his legs entangled in the tape by blasting himself into a wall. He curses loudly as he hits the wall hard, and Izuku also curses internally. He'd been hoping to take Bakugo out as quickly and efficiently as possible, but now that the ambush has failed, things are bound to get messy. "Deku!" Bakugo roars as he gets to his feet, as if to prove Izuku's point. "FNG, fight me, for once," he spits. "Fight me with your quirk." Izuku would like to avoid that as much as possible, "Thank you very much." So when Bakugo rushes at him with his signature right hook, instead of using his quirk, Izuku grabs the blonde, flips him over his head, and throws him. But it looks like Bakugo has learned from the ambush, and is ready this time. Even as he goes flying, he uses a blast from his palms to break the fall and come rushing at Izuku again. "You shitty," he throws a punch, arrogant, aims a roundhouse kick at Izuku's head. Bsrd. He hisses, moving both arms forward and firing a blast. Izuku dodges the blows, slowly inching back and leading Bakugo away from the staircase Uraraka headed to. She hasn't contacted him yet, so he needs to either capture Bakugo or stall for more time. So instead of keeping silent, Izuku decides to start talking back. I really don't get it, he says. Between you and me, I'd have thought you were the arrogant bee. Why do you insist on calling me that? It's the most lip Izuku has given Bakugo in all their 10 years of acquaintance. And Bakugo looks so bewildered that he outright stops his assault. He stares at Izuku like he can't even believe what he's hearing, and that reaction startles Izuku in turn. He'd just been trying to buy Uraraka more time by stalling Bakugo. It is the first time he's really talked back to the boy, but he'd never thought what he'd just said would garner such a reaction. Why? What do you even? You don't even. Bakugo kind of gapes at him, then starts laughing harshly. He presses the palms of his hands into his eyes. F-, he says. F-. All this time I've been trying to. And you don't even. F-. Bakugo lowers his hands and glares at Izuku. His eyes are accusing. For all these years, you never once deigned to even show me your quirk. And the one time you do use it, you use it to save me. How the F is that not looking down on me? He laughs again, a harsh bark that sounds like it hurts. And that's not all. You keep stepping in front of me but never use your quirk, like I'm not even worth it. And the thing is, you never even look at me. Bakugo is snarling now, raising his right arm and pointing it at Izuku. He hooks a finger into the pin sticking out of the grenade-like support item on his arm. I'll make you look at me. I'll make you use your quirk. A mad grin takes over Bakugo's features, and Izuku can only watch frozen with wide eyes. FNG, look at me, Deku. Look at me. Pulls the pin. The blast rocks the entire building. Izuku barely manages to shake himself out of his shock just in time to dodge behind a corner out of the way of the explosion, though not before his left arm is hit by the blast. But pain has never really bothered him, and he can't focus on it all the more now. He really hadn't been expecting much when he'd asked Bakugo that question. The boy had a grudge against Izuku since they were little, seemingly for no reason at all, and Izuku had been too used to Hisashi's causeless violence that he'd never questioned it when the same came from Bakugo. But that had been the problem, he realizes. Bakugo had reminded Izuku so much of Hisashi that he'd seamlessly transitioned his mindset from one tormentor to the other. But the thing is, Bakugo isn't Hisashi. He had never been Hisashi. Bakugo had taken the fact that Izuku had a quirk but wouldn't use it as an insult, as a way of saying he wasn't even worth it. And of course Izuku didn't mean it like that, but he can understand how Bakugo could have taken it that way. And then there's the other thing he'd said. Stop looking down on me, he had said. And Izuku never meant to, but maybe he had. Because every time he faced down Bakugo's rage and explosions, all he could think had been, you have nothing on my father. Bakugo's desperate and almost hurt expression comes to mind again. Look at me. Look at me. Let it never be said that Bakugo Katsuki is not sharp. He had known, even before Izuku himself, that Izuku wasn't seeing him as he was. Izuku had been seeing Bakugo almost as a substitute Hisashi, and that had been why the blonde had always been so mad at him. And that doesn't change what Bakugo did. It doesn't change the fact that he was a bully, that he was a bad friend, that he was a bad person. But it does change Izuku's perspective. After 10 years, he finally feels like he understands Bakugo. And he feels sorry. Uraraka's voice comes in through his earpiece as Izuku gets up, letting him know that she's found Ida and the nuke. She's almost right above where Izuku is now. But Izuku has more pressing matters at hand at the moment. No matter what kind of person Bakugo is or was, and no matter whether Izuku meant it or not, the fact still stands that he hurt Bakugo. And Izuku, well, he's never been able to leave someone in need of help. All right, Kaken, he calls, stepping out from behind his cover. You win. I'll fight you. His hood has been blown away and his left arm has been grazed by the blast, but his mouthpiece is still hanging in place around his neck and resting at his collarbone. The mask is the one part he deviated from his mother's handmade costume and commissioned for a support item. It's a sturdy white mouthguard with stripes on the side and a midsection with holes, and it goes over the lower half of his face, fully covering his nose and mouth. The important part is that it's fireproof. Izuku had hung it around his neck, but now he brings it up in place over his mouth. If he has to breathe out fire, the mouthguard will keep it in even without Izuku having to desperately clamp his hand over his mouth and half-smother himself in a desperate attempt to keep the fire from touching anyone else. The mask itself is fireproof, as is Izuku's mouth, so as long as the support item does its job, it should allow Izuku to freely spit out fire without fear of it burning anyone. It's effectively a muzzle that lets Izuku use his pole without having to worry about breathing out fire. Bakugo needs help, but the kind of help he needs or wants from Izuku isn't hugs or words. No, if Izuku wants to help Bakugo, this is what he needs to do. He spreads his feet in a battle stance and raises one hand towards Bakugo. "Come on then, Kaken," he says, baring his teeth in a grin behind his muzzle. "I won't bite." Bakugo looks surprised, like he didn't think he'd actually be able to get Izuku to fight him. But then his entire face lights up. Finally! The fight that follows is surprisingly short considering how heavily loaded it is. Izuku pulls, and Bakugo is yanked towards him with a yelp that turns into a delighted, and half-crazed, if you ask Izuku, laugh. He grins while bringing around his right palm midair, but Izuku has been on the receiving end of that particular move too many times to fall for it. He dodges around the blast, getting behind Bakugo. Pressure from his quirk builds up, but this time, Izuku readily spits out the fire pooling in his mouth. He lets out the flame, and the coughs hack through his body. Tendrils of smoke rise out of the holes in the midsection of his mouthguard, but not a flicker of fire is seen outside it. But the most important thing about this mask is that it keeps the fire in without Izuku having to force it back with his own hands. In other words, it frees up both his hands. Bakugo is already turning to face him, but even as his body is shaking from the coughs that rack it, Izuku grabs the collar on Bakugo's costume with both hands and swings him around into a wall. Even while face-planting, Bakugo shows his remarkable battle sense and manages to aim a palm behind his back and blast Izuku. He hisses, forced to retreat. But he pulls Bakugo after him, catching the blonde in his arms in a parody of a hug. The only thing is, Izuku's hands are holding the capture tape. What the foo? Bakugo doesn't even get to finish his sentence as Izuku deftly wraps the capture tape over most of his body and his lower face, effectively trapping his arms and legs and gagging his mouth. Izuku has idolized Eraserhead for 2/3 of his life, after all. As a hardcore fanboy, he'd practiced his hero's favored weapon a little. "Villain Bakugo, captured," a mechanical voice rings out. Bakugo squirms, but the capture tape holds strong. Izuku coughs up some fire and grins down at Bakugo, though he probably can't see it through the mask that's still covering his face. The glare Bakugo gives him is less murderous and more resigned. "It's progress. Uraraka," Izuku calls. "Are you still in the same place?" "Deku," a relieved voice comes over his earpiece. "Oh, thank God, yes, but Ida keeps moving the nuke out of my grasp. I don't know what to do, and we're running out of time." Izuku looks up at the ceiling. He could join Uraraka against Ida, as was his original plan, but he's not sure if he'll be able to use his pull against Ida's speed. And there's not enough time for trial and error. So, keep close to a wall and tell me where Ida is. When you see the signal, float yourself and go for the nuke. What's the signal? You'll know it when you see it. Izuku then proceeds to drag Bakugo to a corner of the room. Being tied up like a cocoon, there's nothing Bakugo can do about it except futilely kicking his legs. Izuku sets them in position, mindful of the stream of Uraraka's voice as she details Ida's position for him. When Uraraka informs him that Ida has taken to the opposite wall from her, Izuku takes Bakugo's left arm and points it to the middle of the ceiling where neither of them will be caught directly in the blast. The grenade launcher in Bakugo's right arm has already been used, but the one on his left is still intact and full of his explosive sweat. Bakugo's eyes widen in realization and outrage. Izuku grins again. "Sorry, Kaken. But if you didn't want me to take advantage of it, you shouldn't have shown it to me in the first place." He hooks his finger in and pulls out the pin. The ceiling is blasted apart, and Izuku thinks he hears a startled yell from Ida. He waits a moment more, and that mechanical voice calls out again. Nuke retrieved. Winner, hero team. Izuku is sent to Recovery Girl to get his left arm patched up, even though in his opinion it's not anything worth fussing over. Recovery Girl seems to disagree, though, and tuts at him disapprovingly. Didn't I tell you not to make this a pattern? It's only the second day of school, and already I've seen you 3 times including the entrance exam. She continues fussing over him as she treats the burns and blisters Bakugo's blast left on him. But as she peels away more of the sleeve of his tattered costume, the woman stills. These are some old scars, she says quietly. Izuku looks down to see what she's talking about, then has to hide a wince. There was a reason he always wears long sleeves. Yes, he says awkwardly, pointedly avoiding the questioning eyes boring into the side of his face. He knows the old, jagged, crisscrossing scars on his forearms aren't pretty. But he's not about to tell her that Hisashi had gone through a phase where he was particularly fond of jackknives. At least she hasn't taken a look at his back yet. There's an awkward moment as Recovery Girl scrutinizes Izuku with questioning and heavily loaded eyes, while Izuku does his best to avoid meeting her gaze and fidgets. Eventually, Recovery Girl ends their one-sided staring contest with a resigned sigh. Fine. Heaven knows you teenagers can be stubborn as mules. But from now on, if you get hurt in any way, you come to me and don't just try to tend to it yourself like these. She lightly taps the web of scars. You hear, young man? Izuku ducks his head. Recovery Girl is a professional. She seems to have deduced just from seeing the way his scars formed that his young self had tried to awkwardly treat the wounds himself instead of getting proper medical attention. Yes, ma'am, he dutifully whispers. He's soon let off with a firm kiss on his cheek. But even as he leaves, Izuku still feels her gaze weigh heavily on his back. When Izuku gets back to class, his classmates flock toward him like excited puppies. Oh hey, Midoriya's back. Man, that was some awesome stuff back there. We couldn't hear what you guys were saying, but that was heated. It was so cool how you reverse ambushed Bakugo. And how you used his own attack to win. Divine retribution. The first match was so intense it got the rest of us all fired up. I guess that's to be expected since you two placed first and second in the practical exam. And the way you were so quick with the capture tape was really impressive too, Ribbit. It almost looked like how Aizawa-sensei used his capture weapon yesterday. Izuku hides a wince at that last startlingly accurate observation from Azui, or Tsuyu as she insists. They go around making introductions until Uraraka approaches him a little nervously. Hey Deku. I'm not sure if this is the right thing to do, but, that Bakugo guy asked. Well, told us to tell you that he'd be waiting for you outside. Izuku blinks. That's new. Uraraka, bless her kind soul, looks worried for him. Are you sure it'll be okay? It looked like he wasn't really nice to you. But Izuku smiles at her. Thank you, Uraraka. But I think I'll be alright. Deku. Izuku turns to find Bakugo straightening up from the wall he'd been leaning on and approaching him. He has his bag slung over one shoulder, shoulders slouched, his hands in his pockets, and that signature scowl on his face. But Izuku knows Bakugo well enough to recognize that the expression on his face is nowhere near actual anger. He looks conflicted. Like he's received a present only to be told he can't open it until Christmas. I've been trying to get you to use your quirk since we were 5, he begins. And I finally did, but even then you only used part of it. You didn't use that fire that I know you have. And Izuku's heart leaps to his throat. His fire? How does Bakugo know about that? Even when using his pull, he'd kept it smoldered so well that even All Might found out about it only after Izuku told him. Of course. Bakugo must have seen it when he first saw Izuku's pull. Back when Izuku had faced the slime villain, he hadn't yet thought to breathe fire out of his mouth, so he'd had to risk pushing out a bit of flame in his hand. And Bakugo had been right. Behind him. Of course Bakugo had to be the one to see his fire. Of course it had to be the one person who wouldn't rest until he got what he wanted out of Izuku. Because life isn't fair, and it certainly isn't kind. Bakugo continues, running a hand over his face. And even so, you still beat me. And then there's that ice guy, and that ponytail beach too. The sheet. He looks up and meets Izuku's gaze. But and if you too. I'm not going to lose to them. And I'll make you use all your quirk and beat you at your best. I'm gonna be number one, you hear? Then he stalks off, but his shoulders aren't as bunched up as they usually are. Izuku watches his childhood friend? Can he call him that? Walk away silently. For the first time in 10 years, he feels like he understands Bakugo. Being a bad person is not the same thing as being a villain. And sharing a few traits does not make Bakugo into Hisashi. Kaken, he calls out. Bakugo pauses his steps to look over his shoulder. Izuku gives him a half smile. I'm not going to use fire, Bakugo bristles at that, but Izuku continues on. But that has nothing to do with looking down on you. I never meant to. I'm sorry for not seeing you as you are. Bakugo looks at Izuku for a long moment at that apology. Then he scoffs and turns back around, though there's something about his posture that's even more relaxed and lighter than before. Whatever. I'll make you use it. And you'd better keep looking at me, you arrogant bee. The corner of Izuku's mouth quirks up slightly at the insult. I'll make you use it, he'd said. Good luck with that. After classes have let out, Aizawa is looking over the written report of Class 1 as trial of battle that All Might oversaw earlier that day. He's doing his best to ignore All Might's All Mightness sprinkled throughout the report, and then young Midoriya pulls an eraser head on young Bakugo and binds him with the capture tape in a truly stunning move, when the intercom rings. Aizawa, he says as he picks it up, almost glad for the distraction. This is Recovery Girl. The elderly nurse's voice comes over the line. I need to talk to you about one of your students, Midoriya Izuku. Of course she does, and of course it's him. Midoriya has been the only one in Aizawa's class to have seen the nurse, after all, both yesterday and today. No matter how bright and well-intentioned he may be, Aizawa has the creeping suspicion that this one's going to be a problem child. He sighs. How bad was it this time? A first-degree burn, blisters, cuts, and bruises. But that's not the reason I'm calling. And oh, does that sound promising? I noticed something while treating him today, so I pulled out his student file. It looks like he requested long sleeves on all his uniforms, including the PE and summer uniforms. But today he came in with half the left sleeve of his costume tattered, so I got a look at his left forearm at least. Normally I wouldn't break patient confidentiality, but these are children, students, and we are their teachers. You are his teacher, so I think you should know this. She pauses, and Aizawa feels as if his breath stills with her. Aizawa, he had scars all over his arm. The breath he'd held comes out in a low hiss. Recovery Girl continues. They were old. I'd say at least 5, maybe even over 10 years old. Treated by an amateur, too, and he didn't deny it when I guessed he'd treated it himself instead of getting proper medical attention. And they're not just from ordinary scrapes. Those were knife marks. They were focused on the outside of his forearms, suggesting he'd been trying to shield himself from someone larger wielding a knife. And Aizawa, Recovery Girl pauses once more, and Aizawa feels his breath catch in his throat again. That was just his left forearm. I didn't even get to see the entire arm, let alone the rest of his body. And I fear what I might find. Silence falls between them. Aizawa pictures Midoriya in his mind. He remembers how the kid had immediately recognized him, not as a teacher, but as the hero Eraserhead. He recalls how he'd looked at Aizawa as if he'd hung the moon. How he hadn't even flinched at pain and even smiled through it, as if far too used to pain for one shattered finger to bother him. And now the scars. There's one vague yet glaringly obvious answer that links all those things together. Did he say how he was scarred? The nurse sighs at Aizawa's quiet question. No. I wouldn't have been as worried if he had. Aizawa hides a grimace in the folds of his capture weapon. Yeah, he'd thought the kid wouldn't talk. Even from what little Aizawa has seen of Midoriya Izuku, he can tell he's not the type of person that goes around showing off his wounds and scars. Both literal and figurative. That I'll keep an eye out and see what I can do. Thank you for telling me, Aizawa finally ends up saying. Of course, Recovery Girl replies. It's our duty to look after our students, after all, and I'll be telling this to All Might too, just so you know. Aizawa's eyebrow quirks up. Aizawa himself has been teaching and dealing with teenagers long enough to know that this kind of problem, a student perhaps having been a victim of a villain activity, the possibility of abuse, probably lingering trauma, has to be treated with care and caution lest they worsen the situation. Children are malleable after all. But All Might lacks the experience in teaching to know to be delicate instead of his usual loud and bright self. Don't worry, Recovery Girl assures, as if picking up on his unease. I'll talk to him, tell him to approach this carefully. And he needs to know this. Well then. And it's not like Aizawa hasn't suspected there might be something between his problem child and the number one hero. It's clear that All Might is trying his best to stay unbiased and fair, but he's the type of person who wears their heart on their sleeve, for better or worse. His fondness for Midoriya is painfully obvious. And as for Midoriya, well, his adoration for All Might is only rivaled by that for Aizawa himself, which Aizawa can't afford to ignore anymore. He bids a subdued farewell to Recovery Girl and hangs up. Aizawa stares blankly at the phone for a long moment. Then he slowly reaches out a hand to pick up the receiver again. He punches in a line of numbers he hasn't called in a long time. "This is Eraserhead," he says as soon as the line is picked up, not even pausing for a greeting. "I need a favor. Every arrest, scuffle, or incident I was a part of from the past 10 to 5 years. I need a file on every single one as soon as possible." He pauses. "Especially anything that's related to a child." Izuku is confused. When Aizawa is in the vicinity, it's only natural for Izuku's attention to zoom in and focus on his hero. He can't help it. He's already gone through this phase with All Might too. Though months of exposition has at least toned down the sheer starstruck awe that surfaces in the presence of the number one hero, it's yet to wear off for his other hero. But the confusing thing is, Aizawa is looking at Izuku too now. It's not obvious. It's subtle, and even Izuku might not have noticed it if he himself hadn't already been hyper-aware of Aizawa. But no matter how secretive Aizawa is about it, it's undeniable that he does. It probably says something about Izuku that at the realization that his hero is watching him, his heart jumps with fear rather than joy. His mind races. But what did he do to single himself out? Izuku did get elected as class president only to promptly hand over the position to Ida, but Aizawa's scrutiny had begun even before that incident. Maybe it had something to do with something that happened in the trial of battle? But then, wouldn't he have said something when he was giving them feedback? Then what? Could it be that he's made the connection between Izuku and Hisashi? No, Izuku tells himself forcefully. He can't have. It's not possible. Hisashi may have been the domineering shadow looming over Izuku's life, but to Aizawa he has only ever been one of the many villains Eraserhead took down. And that was a full decade ago. No matter how good Aizawa's memory may be, there's just no way he can possibly remember Hisashi. That's what Izuku tells himself as he gets on the bus for their trial of rescue, and Aizawa's gaze lingers on him for a moment too long. It's not that he hasn't thought, imagined, dreamed, about telling Eraserhead that he'd saved him and his mother and thanking the hero. Of course he has. But now that he's Izuku's homeroom teacher, things aren't as simple as that. Izuku is worried that if he tells Aizawa, he'll remember Hisashi. That he'll remember how Hisashi had breathed fire, and look at how Izuku holds back the flames in his mouth. Izuku is worried, he's terrified shitless, that Aizawa will think he's like his father. He fingers his mouthguard nervously. Thankfully, his unease is mostly dispelled by the rowdy cheer of his classmates and the novelty of Bakugo being teased. Izuku smiles and laughs with his friends. He actually has friends now, during the bus ride, and by the time they arrive at their destination, an actual USJ, Izuku is calmed down enough to get properly excited at the sight of the space hero No. 13 and go into fan mode side by side with Uraraka. His good mood is brought down a notch when he notices 13 subtly signaling to Aizawa that All Might is out of time and won't be joining them, but his attention is soon grasped by the space hero's speech. "My quirk is called Black Hole. No matter what material may get Seki into its vortex, I'm afraid it will turn into dust. I use this to remove wreckage and save people from disasters. However, it is also a power that can easily be used to kill people." The hero pauses. And in that way, it is no different from the quirks of everyone else here. At those words, a shiver goes through Izuku. His back burns. 13 continues talking about quirks in present-day society, how one misstep is all it takes to accidentally kill someone. Izuku listens with his left fist clenched, nails digging into his palm. Recovery Girl has healed all the burns on his palm, but for some reason, it still itches. If he hadn't blocked the flames with his own hand, then someone else may have suffered for it. But then, 13's grim speech takes a turn. In this lesson, we'll be studying how to use those quirks for the sake of human life. Izuku's fist unconsciously unclenches. Your quirks emphatically do not exist to hurt others. Please leave this exercise having fully understood that your quirks exist to help people. His classmates burst into enthusiastic applause as 13 takes a bow. But all Izuku can do is stare at the hero. He already knows, of course, the duality of quirks. There are countless villains with strength enhancement quirks, but All Might used his to become the #1 hero. Even Endeavor, the #2 hero, has a fire quirk yet uses it not for villainy but heroism. But the thing is, Izuku has never been able to think of his fire in the same way. Izuku's fire is his father's, and he has seen it hurt Inko too many times, has felt it burn himself too many times to dare think of it as anything other than pain and destruction. It has only ever hurt. It can't possibly protect. His fire has been tainted even before it was ever his. But for some reason, 13's words jostle something inside him. Before he can think more about it, though, he hears Aizawa shout out in a panicked voice he's never heard from the usually calm hero. "Keep together and don't move," he barks suddenly. "No. 13. Protect the students." His classmates are mostly confused, but Izuku's blood runs cold. Because he knows Eraserhead, and he knows the hero wouldn't be acting this way for anything less than a mortal. "Crisis. Stay back." Izuku warns as he flings an arm in front of Kirishima, who'd been trying to step closer and get a better view of the people suddenly emerging in the square down below them. Aizawa's gaze briefly flickers to Izuku, and he thinks he sees approval and gratitude underneath the tension in his gaze before the man fixes his goggles over his eyes and turns to the people spilling out onto the plaza. "Midoriya's right. Don't move. Our villains." As if to prove this, a misty black man muses after looking over them. "Eraserhead and no. 13. According to the teacher's curriculum we procured yesterday, All Might was supposed to be here and yet. And doesn't that sound ominous?" A thin man with severed hands clinging all over his body throws his head back. "Where is he? We went through all this trouble and rustled up so many to bring along. You can't tell me All Might, the symbol of peace, isn't here." He pps his head to one side. "I wonder if he'll show up if we kill the kids?" A shock seems to go through the entire class as they finally realize what they're facing. Villains. Some panic, while some speculate about one of the villains jamming the intruder alarm sensors. Through it all, Aizawa steps forward with his back to his class. 13, do the evacuation procedure and try calling the school, he instructs as he grasps the capture weapon around his shoulders. Sensei? You're not going to fight them all alone, are you? Izuku calls in alarm. Because he knows Eraserhead, and knows that his fighting style isn't suited for group combat like this. But his hero just glances back at him with a tiny quirk of a smile that's mostly hidden in the folds of his capture weapon. A hero always has more than one trick up their sleeve. And with that, he turns away and launches himself into the midst of the villains. Aizawa. No, Eraserhead proceeds to decimate their ranks, erasing quirks and using his formidable hand-to-hand combat and capture weapon on any he can't. Some of his classmates breathe a sigh of relief, but Izuku is still rooted to the spot and has his heart in his throat. Because he knows that this isn't Eraserhead's forte. And Izuku can't even tell anyone how much danger their teacher is actually in, because as much as he understands just how dangerous his situation is, Izuku also understands exactly why he'd still taken the risk. The hero must have purposefully thrown himself into the fray in order to set them at ease. And Izuku can't disrespect that by calling out his ruse and throwing everyone into worry and panic. Izuku is the only one who knows. Izuku is the only one who worries and panics right now. Come on, Midoriya. Ida calls. Let's leave it to Aizawa-sensei and evacuate. Izuku grinds his teeth. Ida has a point. If they can get out and call for reinforcements, then Aizawa will have a better chance. So he forces himself to turn away from the hero. But of course life isn't fair, and it certainly isn't kind. I'm afraid I can't allow that. A deceptively polite voice rings out as black mist spreads out before the class, blocking the nearest exit. Greetings, the villain says demurely. We are the League of Villains. I apologize for the intrusion, but we took it upon ourselves to enter UA Academy in order to engage All Might, the beacon of hope. We were wondering if we may be allowed to extinguish it, you see. And Izuku's blood runs cold. Not only do they already have Eraserhead in a tight spot, but they want to kill All Might. They want to kill All Might. It feels like the worst nightmare. And it only worsens when Bakugo and Kirishima rush at the villain. Izuku pulls them back in turn, having noticed 13 flip open the casing on their finger. With the students out of the way, 13 is free to aim their black hole on the warp villain. But even as Izuku smothers the flames that swell up in his mouth against his left palm, he watches in horror as the villain opens a warp gate behind 13, making their own quirk turn against them. The eyes reflected on 13's helmet are wide with surprise and horror. Izuku knows that feeling only too well. No, he shouts desperately, reaching to pull 13 out of the loop. But before he can, the villain seems to deem 13 incapacitated enough that he removes the warp gates on his own volition, dropping 13 to the ground. And this time, he turns his attention to the class. Run! Someone shouts as the black mist envelopes them. Izuku grabs Azui, who's the closest to him, and pulls them to the other side, just narrowly escaping the dark grasp of the mist. He frantically turns around as soon as they tumble to the ground. Ida and Shoji seem to have been able to grab a few people each, including 13. But most of his classmates are missing. I wonder if he'll show up if we kill the kids? The villain's words come back to Izuku. He pales. The others, he whispers, almost gasps as he smothers fire in his mouth. We're scattered and in disarray, Shoji tells him, his many arms spread wide with multiple ears and eyes swiveling on their ends. But we're all still within the facility. A choked breath of relief leaves Izuku's mouth. As soon as the instant panic leaves him, Izuku's mind goes into overdrive. Stupid, idiotic, useless. He should have been more alert. He should have pushed through the backlash and pulled 13 out of the way instead of being busy trying to swallow down the flames. You're going to have to figure out a way around your limits, he recalls Aizawa saying on the first day of school, before they get you killed. Worse, before they get someone else killed. Izuku grits his teeth. He can't afford to wallow in self-disgust now. With Aizawa fighting in the plaza down below and 13 injured, they have no guiding figure. It's up to them. Ida, he calls tightly, his hand lifting up the mouthguard from his collarbone and settling it over his face, his eyes. Never leaving the villain. Ida, I'll hold off the warp villain. When you see your chance, run. Go get help. Because now more than ever, help is what they need. 13 needs medical attention. Their classmates may need saving. Eraserhead needs reinforcement. But Ida looks to Izuku with an almost lost expression. In a startling moment of clarity, Izuku understands. The earliest memories he himself has are those of fear, pain, and destruction. This means that when faced with malicious intent, he doesn't freeze up and panic because he's used to it. Because to him, it's nothing new. But his classmates are different. They haven't grown up with a budding villain controlling their lives, they haven't tiptoed through their childhood with bated breath, they haven't known constant pain or fear. They're normal. And just like normal children, they're at loss now that they've lost their teachers and are faced with a real threat. Izuku sweeps a glance over his remaining classmates. It's only been a few seconds since 13 collapsed and Izuku instructed Ida. But they're all looking at him, looking to him, because they instinctively feel like he's the only one who's even remotely calm in this situation. And of course he isn't. Of course he isn't calm. Of course he's just as terrified as every one of them. But just like Aizawa jumped to battle the villains for the sake of putting their minds at ease, Izuku can keep up a front for them too. He sets his mouth in a determined line and turns his eyes to Ida. I know you don't like it. But Ida, you aren't running away, you're running to get help. And that's something only you can do, class president. Their eyes meet. Izuku drills all the sincerity, conviction, and faith he can into Ida through his gaze. It's like 13 said, use your quirk to save others. Ida seems to hesitate for one more moment before steeling himself. Understood. He shouts as he readies himself and revs his engines, even though it looks like the very thought of leaving his classmates behind physically pains him. The warp villain tuts in false sympathy. You may still be just children, but I'm still surprised you spout all your plans in front of me. Izuku bares his teeth in a grin behind his mask. It doesn't matter if you hear. You won't be able to stop Ida because you'll be too busy with me. No, Uraraka says as she steps up next to him along with all his other classmates that are here. They look shaken and scared, but also determined. You'll be too busy with us. Izuku looks at them, surprised, but then his grin becomes more genuine. Azui, try to capture him. Izuku calls out as he dodges a warp gate forming under him and Shoji envelopes another that opens right behind Ida. Azui doesn't even pause to quip her usual, call me Tiu, before she whips out her tongue. Siro joins in with his tape, but both that and Azui's tongue pass through the villain's mist-like body. The villain chuckles as if amused. He didn't even bother to get out of the way. Izuku's mind is in overdrive. Siro and Azui are their only long-range fighters at the moment. Anyone else would have to get close and risk being hurt. Except it looks like even if they do get close, they won't be able to have any effect. But if the villain is completely invulnerable, why did he redirect 13th's black hole away from himself? Why not just stand there and mock them, like he's doing to them now? He must have a true body in there somewhere. Izuku grasps out with his quirk. He can only pull corporeal things. But there has to be at least some substance to the mist villain. Like that suspicious piece of armor. He grabs it and pulls. The villains come flying towards him with unbelievable speed. Izuku's startled yelp is mixed with the villain's own surprised gasp. Izuku barely manages to jump out of the way and sidestep the villain, making him shoot past and tumble into the ground behind. A moment of silence settles on them, only broken as Izuku coughs up fire into his mouthguard and the villain slowly rises to his feet with narrowed eyes. What did you just do? He asks, his false politeness chipping away. Understanding dawns on Izuku, and the bare bones of a plan forms in his mind. Even as flames lick his lips, Izuku bares his teeth in a grin. The lighter something is, the easier it is for him to pull. The mist villain seems to be mostly incorporeal, making most physical attacks useless against him. But that also makes him very, very light. Which only means that Izuku can toss him around like a rag doll. He pulls again, and this time is prepared to jump out of the way as the villain goes flying past him. Before he even touches the other side, he pulls again, probably giving the villain whiplash as he's forced to change his direction mid-flight. The villain sputters, outraged, and wisps of black mist start forming around him, but he seems too disoriented to properly open a gate. And Izuku pulls him away from his pitiful attempt at escape. Izuku feels like a matador, luring the bull towards him only to release the pole and step out of the way at the last moment so the villain goes soaring past him instead of crashing into him. It's just as deadly a game as a real bullfight. He can only pull things towards him, after all, so if he's even a moment too late to relinquish the pole and jump aside, he'll be sent sprawling along with the villain. But he can't afford to let up and give the villain time to open a warp gate either. Ida, go! Sato shouts. Izuku is too focused to be able to spare even a glance at his friends, and everyone can tell that every moment is costing him. Ida shakes off his shock and takes off running, making it through the doors just before Izuku hits his limit and can't keep pulling successively anymore. He loses control of the pull halfway through, dragging the warp villain across the enclosure. The backlash from pulling consecutively hits hard. He doubles over, retching into his mask as the fire roars out of his throat with vengeance. He tries to clamp down on the fire, put a tight lid on it, make it as small as possible. His mask is fireproof, but he'd been warned that it can only take so much heat before its functions start breaking down. And Izuku can't afford to lose his mouthguard now. So he forces the fire roaring to push out of him as small as possible. It feels like trying to stop a crack in a dam with his bare hands. He's doubled over from the force of the fire trying to push out of him, and him trying to push it down. Eventually he's forced to his knees, then has to drop to all fours as he gasps and chokes on mouthfuls of fire. Smoke gushes out of the holes in his mask, almost clouding his vision. It's worse than when he'd pulled the 0-point robot, worse than the time he tried to side jump in the quirk assessment test. Izuku had pushed himself to the limit in a desperate attempt to buy Ida time, and now he's paying the price. Deku! Uraraka calls, approaching with a worried look on her face. But soon her expression turns to horror. Deku! Midoriya! Izuku just barely manages to lift his head to see the warp villain swoop down in front of him. The slits of light that are his eyes are narrowed dangerously, and his previously amiable voice is a furious hiss now. Oh shit. That's quite enough with you, boy. And black mist bursts out from him, enveloping them both. The alarmed shouts of his classmates fade away as Izuku is rushed through the portal. He lands heavily on the other side, disoriented for a moment as he scrambles to his feet. What's this, Kurogyri? Izuku turns at the bland, almost bored voice to find the villain with hands all over him. Shigaraki Tamura, the warp villain Kurogyri? Says, and his voice shows clear deference. No. 13 is incapacitated, but this boy, he spits out in Izuku's direction, distracted me enough to allow one of the students to escape the facility. The villain. Shigaraki stills for a moment before starting to furiously scratch his own neck. Kurogyri, if you can't be a proper warp gate, now dozens of pros will come. Then it's game over for us. Game over. He pauses, then turns his head towards Izuku, who's been watching him warily. But before we go, maybe I can squeeze in a bonus match? I've never seen Kurogyri so rankled up. You sure must have done something to get this unflappable guy like this. Hey, won't you tell me what you did? I hope you're at least more fun than your teacher. Shigaraki trails off with a meaningful sideways glance. Izuku risks taking his eyes off the villain for a moment to steal a glance in the direction. But once he looks, he can't look away. A giant, hulking black villain with popping eyes and an exposed brain is crouched on top of Aizawa. A bruised, bleeding, broken Aizawa. Izuku's whole world stills. Eraserhead slips out in a disbelieving whisper. Because somewhere in the back of Izuku's mind, Aizawa is still his hero before he is his sensei. Aizawa doesn't even stir. Eraserhead didn't even make a proper toy for Nomu. I hope you'll at least last longer. Shigaraki keeps droning on about something, but Izuku isn't even listening. Eraserhead is a hero. His hero. He saved Izuku and Inko. In Izuku's subconscious, he's on par with All Might. But when Izuku looks at him now, the image of his broken and beaten mother overlaps his hero. And that, he can't. Izuku hurls himself at Aizawa and the Nomu, ignoring Shigaraki's indignant protest. He pulls at the villain because he can't pull Aizawa, not in that condition, not with arms bent in strange angles and blood pooling around him. But the Nomu doesn't even budge. A shocked sound escapes Izuku. The Nomu is big, sure, but it should still be lighter than the robots Izuku had been flinging around with the help of One for All powering up his pull. Does that mean the Nomu is resisting with sheer strength? Izuku's mind goes in overdrive. In the span of the heartbeat, 1,000 thoughts race through his mind. His pull doesn't work on the Nomu, but he can't afford to use One for All and break his limbs because even with the Nomu gone, there's still Shigaraki and Kurogyri and who knows how many more villains. That leaves only one option. But he can't. Izuku swore to himself, to his mother, to the laughing memory of his father that he would never use his fire. He especially doesn't want Aizawa to see even a flicker of flames coming out of him, lest the hero is reminded of Hisashi. But that's not the reason. It's not that Izuku won't break his oath for Aizawa. He would burn himself 1,000 times if it means he can save his hero. But the thing is, this fire he has isn't the kind of power that can save anyone. It only hurts and destroys. It's tainted. It's a quirk that can't save anyone. But then, 13's words come back to him. Your quirks emphatically do not exist to hurt others. Please leave this exercise having fully understood that your quirks exist to help people. The words he himself spoke to Ida come back to him. Use your quirk to save others. Izuku's fire has only ever destroyed what he held dear. It made his mother scream, it made his father laugh, and it burned him. But can destruction lead to salvation? The backlash from trying to pull the Nomu is building up, the fire in him surging upwards and howling to be set free, trying to push out. Still he hesitates. Man, it's not polite to ignore people when they're talking to you, you know? Shigaraki drawls. Nomu bash his head. The Nomu lifts Aizawa's bloodied head by his hair and smashes it back into the ground. And at that, Izuku snaps. All his life, Izuku has been pushed. He has been pushed away by his mother when she locked him in the broom cupboard. He has been pushed down by his father every time Hisashi beat him. He has been pushed around by Bakugo for 10 years. He's been pushed away, pushed down and pushed around. For the first time in his life, Izuku pushes back. The students left near the entrance of the USJ are in disarray. With no teacher, no leader, no Midoriya, no one has any idea what to do. No. 13 is still breathing, but they're not responding to me. Ashido calls from the hero's side with tears in her eyes. Zero looks around nervously with Sato. The warp guy isn't here anymore. Should we evacuate? Or should we try to find the others? I don't know. Deku would, a small voice whispers in Uraraka's mind. But he's not here, another voice furiously snaps back. Uraraka bites her lip to keep in a sob. Ever since the teachers have been out of commission, Midoriya had been guiding them, whether he knew it or not. Everyone followed his lead without question, even all the usually independent or headstrong people. Midoriya had been the one to instantly come up with a plan and direct them. His calmness had soothed everyone's panic. His quick thinking had assured everyone's doubts. His strength against the villain had given everyone hope. He had saved everyone here. And they couldn't save him. You'll be too busy with me, Midoriya had told the warp villain. No, Uraraka had said, both to the villain and Midoriya. You'll be too busy with us. But in the end, despite all her pretty words, that's not what happened, is it? All of them knew from the quirk assessment test and the battle simulation that Midoriya's quirk has a crippling side effect. All of them saw how taxing it was for him to keep tossing around the warp villain to disorient him. And yet none of them could do anything to help him. She couldn't do anything to help him. Uraraka's teeth sink deeper into her lip. I found him. Shoji bursts out, and everyone instantly stills and turns to him. Uraraka can see the desperate hope and fear she herself feels reflected on everyone else's face. Shoji's tentacle-like arms are spread wide like a radio dish, ears and eyes on the ends, tense with concentration. Midoriya is down in the central plaza with the warp villain and someone else. I think it's their leader. It's the guy that was talking about killing us. They all exchange a fearful look. Not Midoriya. Please, not Midoriya. They need him, he can't, they can't. But then, something explodes. Uraraka whips around to turn to the plaza. A column of fire is blazing in the center, so bright and intense that she can't make out what's going on or who's making the fire. It roars like a fiery dragon clawing its way up to the sky, furious and awe-striking in its ethereal rage. A tremble goes down Uraraka's spine as the pillar of flames blaze away where she knows her friend is. Deku! Shigaraki and Kurogiri jump back as they shield their eyes against the blazing light and whipping wind. The pair watch in almost awestruck silence for a moment as the intensity of the flames completely obscures the kid from sight. The sight is terrible in its brilliance. Is that how he got under your skin? Shigaraki asks Kurogiri. No, the warp villain answers, his misty form flickering in unease and surprise. I didn't even know that fire is part of his quirk. This is a cheat, Shigaraki hisses, narrowing his eyes against the glare. What is this, Phase 2? This kid isn't even a boss. His gaming jargon seems to be lost on the older villain, but the sentiment is shared. Just then the fire dies down. The flames recede back into the kid, only little flickers running up and down his skin. The light throws his previously soft features into sharp relief and gives his green eyes a strange glint. The white mask that had been over the kid's lower face is charred and smoking. He raises one hand to lift it off his face and lower the mangled mess to his collarbone. His eyes seem to be fixated on Nomu and Eraserhead before they slowly shift to Shigaraki. "Step away from him," he says softly, and somehow his voice carries with uncanny clarity. His words are pointed to Nomu, but they're addressing Shigaraki, those fiery green eyes boring into the villain. It's as if he's already figured out that Nomu only takes orders from Shigaraki in the short time he's been here. If you want to play a game, then fine. Let's play. But leave him out of it. Shigaraki pauses, then smiles eerily. "So the kid cares about Eraserhead, huh? I don't think I will. It's more exciting when the stakes are higher, no?" He points a finger at Eraserhead. "Nomu," but before he can give the order, the kid reaches out a hand towards him and makes a sharp pulling gesture. Shigaraki is yanked forward, stumbling and choking on his words. The force itself isn't very strong, but it's just enough to unbalance him and cut him off. Shigaraki raises his head and looks at the kid with a murderous glare. He kinda sees why even Kurogyri got set at this kid. The kid bares his teeth in a grin. "Just you and me, Shigaraki. Let's play." He pps his head. "Or are you not game?" And oh, if you put it that way. He's not sure how the kid did it, but he's pushed all the right buttons to make Shigaraki laugh in malicious excitement. "Fine. Kurogyri, Nomu, back off." Shigaraki Tamura, Kurogyri tries, but Shigaraki doesn't even spare him a glance. "I said back off." Kurogyri wordlessly steps back after his attempt, and the Nomu raises its giant body off Eraserhead to meander off. Shigaraki turns with a grin of his own to face the kid, who somehow manages to look almost serene for all that his smile is more or less a snarl. "Say, what's your name, mini-boss?" The kid blinks. Then his lips stretch wider. "Midoriya Izuku." And then a burst of flames comes flying into his face. Izuku grins. He bares his teeth and grins, and uses it in the stead of the mouthguard that's now broken and dangling at his collarbone. He hides behind it like a mask, uses it to bury all his fear and doubts and insecurity of the fire pushing out of him, puts it up as a front to shield himself, and brandishes it like a weapon. He's sure he'll have an appropriate breakdown and freak out about, well, everything once he makes out of this. If he makes out of this. For now, though, all he can focus on is the fact that Aizawa has been left alone. He's facing off the leader of the villains, and he needs to buy as much time as possible. He can't afford to break down now. The fire had burst out of him like his emotions had physically manifested, but now it's smoldered down back inside him. Izuku can't afford an outburst like that again, not with Aizawa so close, but he can't just rely on his pull and open himself up to attack while he rides out the consequences anymore either. Instead of pulling, Izuku consciously pushes a blast of fire out of one hand. Shigaraki dodges out of the way with surprising agility and comes for Izuku with a hand outstretched. But this time Izuku pulls, and Shigaraki stumbles as the momentum forces him faster than he'd expected. Izuku thinks he hears the villain hiss, "cheat," but ignores it in favor of bringing around his fist to connect with Shigaraki's stomach. The villain coughs, but instead of pulling away, he takes advantage of their closeness to grab at Izuku's face. He pulls himself back, just barely dodging the grasping fingers, and Shigaraki's hand brushes the mouthguard on his collarbone instead. It disintegrates in a matter of seconds. Izuku scrambles back frantically. The broken remnants of the mask fall to the ground with a pitiful clatter. A chill goes through him at the thought that that could have been his face. A burning rage passes through him at the realization that that's what happened to Aizawa's raw and exposed elbow. Shigaraki is flexing his fingers, grinning through the severed hand on his face. So close. He jumps out of the way as another jet of flames come at him. They continue on like this for a few more tense moments. Izuku is at his limit, not used to using this side of his quirk. Quirks are like muscles, after all, and his are comparable to that of a newborn babe. Finding the balance between push and pull is not easy, especially doing it for the first time in the heat of battle. Not to mention that some part of his mind is still freaking out about the fire blazing at his command. He's both mentally and physically straining himself. It's the first time he's actually pushed out the fire instead of having it push out of him, not since that very first time when he was 4 and his mother screamed. And perhaps that thought causes him to slip. Shigaraki closes in again, one finger just barely grazing Izuku's skin. Izuku flings out his left arm in panic and pushes, but instead of the villain dodging the stream of fire like every other time, he recoils with a scream. Izuku freezes. He'd consciously or perhaps unconsciously been avoiding aiming the fire directly at the villain, only using it to intimidate and change his course. Because no matter if this is a villain, no matter if he wants to kill All Might, no matter if he broke Aizawa, Izuku would still never wish this fire on anyone. But somewhere in the back of his mind, Hisashi laughs. The familiar smell of burnt flesh hits Izuku's nose. The hand on Shigaraki's face has been knocked off by the blast, and he holds one hand near his burned face while the other wildly groups around for it. "Father," he says. And suddenly, Izuku is burning. He chokes on a gasp as the fire in his left hand abruptly scorches his palm. He flings his hand away from himself as if trying to shake it off. But in his moment of inattention, Shigaraki has already put the severed hand back on his face and is coming back at Izuku with his hand outstretched. Izuku pulls himself out of the way, but this time doesn't dare follow up with a jet of fire. Shigaraki grins madly through the hand on his face, his eyes glinting and his left cheek red with a burn. "Oh, what's this? Are you burned by your own fire? In that case, change of tactics. Nomu." Shigaraki pivots violently. Izuku is confused for a moment before he realizes that he's headed straight for Aizawa. At the same time, the Nomu awakens from its docile state and springs to action, also headed for the hero from the other side. Izuku's heart stops for a moment. He can only pull one thing at a time, which means he can only stop one of them if he only pulls. And just not. Whatever fear Izuku has about burning anyone on principle, Shigaraki can't have him. Not Aizawa. Not Eraserhead. Not him, not him, not him, not him, not him. One hand grasps out and pulls Shigaraki back, while the other flings forward and pushes a blast of flames at the Nomu. The Nomu shrieks an inhuman sound. Izuku bites his lip as he does his best to ignore it and is already running to put himself between Aizawa and the villains when he hears Shigaraki's delighted laugh. A warp gate opens in front of Izuku. His own flames come rushing out of it. "Oh shit. So this was his plan. Checkmate," comes Shigaraki's gleeful voice. Izuku turns his back to the flames, trying to shield Aizawa as much as possible with his own small body. He grits his teeth and waits for the familiar white-hot pain and scorching agony and the burn, burn, burn. But it never comes. A silent beat passes. "That was cool, Eraserhead," comes Shigaraki's grudging acknowledgement. Izuku opens his eyes to find Aizawa still on the floor with his head barely raised, his eyes red and looking straight at him. He erased Izuku's quirk. He saved Izuku, again, even while he himself is on the brink of death. A shaky breath escapes Izuku as Aizawa slumps back down, unconscious, his face planting on the floor again. Izuku is trembling from emotions he can't even name, mouthing words he doesn't even recognize, a sob and a gasp choked in his throat. He pushes it all down and turns to face the villains again, firmly putting himself between them and Aizawa. Shigaraki is still on the floor where Izuku had deposited him with his pull. And Kurogiri is hanging to the back, but the Nomu is rearing up and screeching. There are still licks of flame tearing its skin, yet it still comes dashing towards them. The momentum is so strong that Izuku isn't sure that even the push of fire will stop it. But a hero always has more than one trick up their sleeve, Aizawa had said. In Izuku's case, he has 3. "Sorry, sensei," he whispers as he picks up Aizawa as gently as he can. He's wildly glad for all the weight training All Might made him go through in the junk heap as he bears the hero's full weight in his arms. Izuku flicks a one for all charged finger in the direction of Shigaraki and Kurogiri, sending a blast of air so that they can't do anything to interfere like last time. He waits for the last moment before the Nomu is upon them, then jumps up and jumps off the Nomu with a one-for-all powered kick. Smash! Gusts of wind billow out and Izuku lands clumsily, far from the Nomu, doing his best not to jostle Aizawa. He'd been willing to sacrifice his leg to save Aizawa, even though it would make the fight later on harder, but to his shock his leg isn't shattered. It feels like it's only fractured, maybe? Not that he's complaining. What? Telekinesis, fire, and now super strength too? You're a cheat, Shigaraki complains. I'm the cheat? You're the one who broke the rule of playing one-on-one. Izuku shoots back, not daring to set Aizawa down lest they come after the hero again. But I'm a villain, Shigaraki points out. Well, fair point. The villain scratches his neck. Man. I mean this is fun and all, but you keep getting distracted because of Eraserhead. What are you trying to be, a hero? Izuku barks out a laugh. He knows he can't be one, not with Hisashi's tainted fire burning at his back. No. I'm holding on to one, and holding out for another. A boom sounds near the entrance of the USJ, and Izuku's grin widens. And it looks like I bought just enough time. All Might emerges from the smoke, ripping off his tie with a thunderous scowl. Have no fear. For I am here. With the Nomu's movements hampered by the numerous burns riddling its body, All Might makes quick work of the artificial human. And with Ida bringing the reinforcements, Shigaraki and Kurojairi have no choice but to retreat by themselves. Shigaraki's eyes glare at All Might as he sinks into the warp gate. We failed this time. But we'll get you next time, All Might, symbol of peace. And you. He suddenly turns to Izuku. Shigaraki smiles. Let's play again. A shiver goes through Izuku. He clutches Aizawa's bloody body to his chest as he stands there, almost numb in the aftershock. The adrenaline comes crashing down, but his senses are still in frantic overdrive, messing up his cognition and dulling his mind. His ears are ringing with Inko's screams and Hisashi's laugh, but his arms are holding one of his heroes. As exhaustion washes over him, he can't think. Oh my god, Aizawa, someone calls as they approach quickly with outstretched arms. Somewhere in the back of Izuku's foggy mind he recognizes him as Present Mike, but the majority of his mind is still running high on survival and protective instincts. What he sees is a threat that's trying to take Aizawa away, and no, not him. Izuku bares his teeth and steps back, tightening his arms carefully around Aizawa. Something in his leg makes a resounding snap. He doesn't even flinch. The threat Present Mike stops still where he is, evidently noticing that something is wrong. He looks around, then frantically calls to some people and waves them over. Izuku stays where he is, trembling slightly, clutching his broken hero protectively. A wall of cement swells in front of Izuku, cutting off everyone else, all other threats. Izuku still doesn't let himself relax, though. But then All Might is there. Not buffed up and towering, but skeletal and bloody and crouching to meet Izuku's eyes without looming over him. In this small secluded sanctuary of cement where only he and his heroes are, Izuku finally feels a little less on edge. Midoriya, All Might calls, and it's hard to tell on that gaunt face, but Izuku thinks he looks almost as emotionally broken as Aizawa's body is. Midoriya, my boy, it's all right now. You're safe. But Izuku just stares at the hero. It's not that he doubts All Might. Even muddled and swaying on his feet as he is, Izuku still implicitly trusts his hero. But with the broken body of his other hero in his arms, dizzy from coming down from his high, and instincts in overdrive, he just can't understand what All Might is saying. All Might blinks as if he's just realized something, and then looks like he's on the verge of crying. My boy, he calls again, voice rough and ragged. He's safe. He's all right. Aizawa. Eraserhead is safe. Izuku understands that. He smiles. It's the last thing he remembers. Tashinori is lying quietly on the hospital bed next to young Midoriya. Aizawa and No. 13 have been carted away to the hospital, none of the other students have been harmed much, and he and Midoriya have been entrusted to Recovery Girl's care. The nurse tuts from her chair. You pushed yourself too far. I won't be surprised if your time went down again. Though, considering the circumstances, I won't say more about that right now. What I will say, though, is that you need to start setting a better example for your successor. Tashinori glances over at young Midoriya. He's still unconscious after having passed out in the USJ. According to Recovery Girl, it has less to do with his physical injuries and more to do with the mental and emotional strain he's gone through. The boy's hair is out of its usual tuft of a half bun, spilling in dark green curls over the pillow. The dark hair contrasts with the pallor of his face, making him look smaller and paler. Something in Toshinori aches. When it looks like Toshinori isn't going to answer, Recovery Girl continues. He's being smart with One for All and not throwing it around willy-nilly, but I have a feeling that it has less to do with self-preservation and more to do with the fact that it makes him useless after. He already has another self-destructive quirk, and he's been throwing it around without a care for himself. And after what happened today, I'm worried. Recovery Girl sighs as Toshinori keeps gazing at Midoriya, following his gaze. I see why you chose him. I really do. He's selfless, brave, and caring. But Toshinori, before he's a hero in training, before he's your successor, he's also just a child. The elderly nurse gives Toshinori a look. He's just like you in some ways. And Toshinori, while that might be a good thing for a hero, it's not for a person. Especially a person you care about. And Toshinori understands. He props himself up on the bed, turning so he can properly face Midoriya. He hears Recovery Girl sighing again in sympathy and compassion, but he doesn't have the presence of mind to properly talk to her right now. Just yesterday, she had told him about Midoriya's scars. She had told him what she had seen, what she hadn't seen, what she suspected, what it implied. And she had also cautioned him not to approach the subject with Midoriya rashly. Just yesterday, he had been told that his bright, kind, caring heir with a heart of gold has scars that dig deep, deeper than any child should have. Just yesterday, he'd had his heart ache for his protégé. And today, his heart feels like it's being slowly and methodically dismantled. He remembers how he found young Midoriya facing off the three main villains with an injured Aizawa in his arms, eyes wild and teeth bared in a desperate grin. He remembers all the blood, smoke, and burns that covered his body. He remembers how protective he was of his teacher even while half unconscious and delirious. He remembers how the boy had only looked relieved at the words that Aizawa, not himself, was safe. All Might understands more than anyone that a hero, and that especially the beacon of hope and the symbol of peace, must push aside their own well-being for the sake of others. As the former wielder, he couldn't have made a better choice for the next successor of One for All. But as a mentor, the weight of passing on his duty finally crashes into Toshinori as he realizes that seeing Midoriya as his successor is not the same thing as seeing the boy as his. Just then Midoriya stirs. His lashes flutter a few times before blinking blearily up at Toshinori. All Might? Toshinori swallows around the lump in his throat. Yes, my boy. Midoriya stares up at him tiredly as if confused for a moment. But then he beams. I'm glad you're all right. And at that Toshinori he can't. He should probably say something. He should applaud Midoriya's courage, or thank him for weakening the Nomu, and tell the boy that he's so proud of him. But in the end, all he can do is climb over to the boy's bed and envelop the child in his arms. Midoriya stiffens as if not used to being hugged, and that just breaks Toshinori all the more as he cards one hand through the boy's curly hair falling freely to his chin. It takes a moment, but Midoriya finally wraps his arms around Toshinori as well. He's hesitant, as if unused to physical contact and also unsure why Toshinori is acting like this all of the sudden. He doesn't care. Toshinori hugs his boy tightly to his chest. They have the next day off from school. Aizawa is let out from the hospital, albeit with bandages covering his entire body, turning him into a mummy. Yamada is here to help him out, cheerily ignoring Aizawa's long-suffering protests that he's just fine. Go on, I'll get your stuff, he grins. You don't want to keep your kid waiting for you, do you? Aizawa blinks. And when he gets down to the hospital lobby, he finds none other than Midoriya Izuku sitting with his head bowed on one of the waiting chairs. He sighs. Then he slowly makes his way over and plops down next to the kid. Midoriya absent-mindedly raises his head, then does a double take. Erase Aizawa-sensei? He gapes. Aizawa notes that the kids almost called him by his hero name again. Shouldn't you be in bed? And shouldn't you be at home? he returns, slouching and leaning back in the plastic chair. He shuffles his casts so they lie more comfortably on the stomach of his black t-shirt, then peers at Midoriya out of the side of his gaze. They sit in silence for a while. Midoriya doesn't look like he's about to breach a topic soon, so Aizawa ponders how to go about handling his problem child. He could mention how reckless it was for the kid to try to face 3 of the main villains on his own. He could reprimand him for not leaving Aizawa and getting wounded. Or he could try to get him to talk about that blazing fire he saw when he briefly woke up. So, he begins. "You never told me you can use fire." The kid winces. I mean, no, I didn't tell you, not that I can't use it. I'm sorry." Aizawa blinks. "For what?" Midoriya looks up at him with something akin to bewilderment. The fire. I know that it only causes destruction. It's not a quirk that can save anyone. I kept it down for so long, and I never should have used it, but I couldn't think of anything else at that moment. I'm so sorry. And well, that doesn't explain much. Aizawa doesn't understand fully what's going on, but he hasn't been teaching teenagers for years with nothing to show for it. He pieces together what he remembers and what he's heard since waking up with what the kid is saying now. It looks like part of Midoriya's quirk is fire. And he's absolutely traumatized by it. Aizawa was going to scold Midoriya for being so reckless, for having no self-preservation, for valuing a pro's life over his own. But at this moment he looks at this kid who's hunched over with despair draped over him like a physical weight, who's crushed by insecurity and shame even after having almost single-handedly dealt with the situation after himself and 13 were out of commission, who's just so broken and realizes that's not what the kid needs right now. He gives a mental screw the plan. If anyone should be apologizing, it should be me. I failed to protect you. But from what I remember, and especially from what I've been hearing, you saved me. And All Might. The fire weakened the Nomu enough for All Might to pull through, and there wasn't a single burn on me. So Midoriya, Aizawa waits until the kid hesitantly raises his head to meet his eyes. Thank you. He gasps. But you had to save me again, he says disbelievingly. Aizawa files away that again for later pursuit. Outwardly he shrugs. It's called teamwork, brat. And I did tell you to find a way around that puking. That was your fire, I presume? He still remembers the burns on the kid's palm, after all. He can make an educated guess. Midoriya nods numbly, and Aizawa gently plops his cast on top of his head. Good to see you take advice to heart. Midoriya slowly raises his hands to the top of his head, all the while staring up at Aizawa like he can't believe he's being praised and thanked. The lost look in his big green eyes makes Aizawa want to do something ridiculous, but thankfully both his arms are in a cast so he physically can't do anything too touchy-feely. Instead, he lightly rubs the end of his cast on the top of Midoriya's head in an awkward pat. I don't know what you think about it, but you saved me and All Might with your fire, Midoriya. You did good. Don't forget that. And for the look that Midoriya gives him, he might as well have told him he'd hung the moon. Yamada comes back, suspiciously late, with Aizawa's hero costume and other belongings. He grins at Midoriya and the kid smiles tentatively back. I'm sorry I didn't recognize you yesterday. Present, Mike, he says while stooping into a low bow. Yamada waves it off. Don't worry about it. I understand that emotions and instincts can get high in stressful situations. But then his smile takes on a devilish turn. Though I do wish I took pictures when you were holding Aizawa bridal style, Yamada says with a wink. Midoriya sputters. Aizawa blinks. Then he slowly turns to stare at his student as if to say you did what? Midoriya's face is turning into an impressive shade of red, and he knows the truth without having to hear a word. He can almost picture it. Himself, slack and unconscious, with Midoriya holding his almost too long form in an awkward bridal style. The mental image is something else. My hero, Aizawa deadpants, and the kid looks like he wants to sink right into the earth. Aizawa lowers his head to hide his grin in the folds of his bandages. As soon as Izuku arrives at school, he's swarmed by a horde of his classmates. Deku! Midoriya! Oh man, hey guys! It's Midoriya. Izuku blinks in bewilderment. Did something happen? Uraraka. Looks at him like she can't even believe him. Did something happen? Are you kidding me? You got kidnapped by the warp villain right in front of our eyes. And the next time we saw you was when you were being carried out of the USJ on a stretcher. And you're asking me if something happened? What Ochako is saying, Azui supplements Uraraka's almost tearful exclamation, is that we were worried about you, Ribbit. Of course they were, Izuku realizes with a start. The students clustered around him with the most worried and relieved expressions are the ones who had been with him at the entrance of the USJ. And the last time they saw him. Yeah, he wasn't in that good shape. Izuku can't help it. He smiles. Sorry for worrying you. But, thank you. I'm all right. Shiro and Sato make a show of patting him down as if to check, and Izuku laughs out loud. God, it feels good having friends. We saw a huge fire down in the plaza. You didn't get caught in that, did you? And just like that, Izuku's emotions come plummeting back down from its high. Because life isn't fair, and it certainly isn't kind. He should tell them. Tell them that it was his quirk. They deserve to know. He opens his mouth. Aizawa-sensei erased it before it burned me, is what he ends up saying. Which is true, but it isn't the truth. His classmate's sigh of relief makes Izuku hate himself, but the fact is that even with All Might hugging him and whispering that he's so proud in his ear, even with Aizawa patting his head and thanking him, it's still not quite enough to overwrite more than a decade of negative reinforcement. The others are oblivious to Izuku's inner turmoil and continue chattering. You know, I was really worried yesterday since I couldn't even contact you and check if you were all right. And that got me thinking, why don't we exchange numbers? Hey, great idea. We can make it a whole class thing, like for emergencies and stuff. Things take off from there. It takes a few crazed moments of everyone passing their phone to the next person before Yaoyorozu suggests everyone just give their number to Ida, and he can send a group text of the entire list to everyone else. Yo, Bakugo. Hurry up and give the class pres your number, man. Kirishima calls. As if I'd let extras like you have my number. Their classmates grumble, almost used to Bakugo's crassness by now. Izuku just hums and scrolls through his own phone. Here, I have his number. You can add this under his name, Ida. Deku. Bakugo gives him a look that's positively betrayed and Ishido openly laughs at his face. Izuku smiles to his friend's laughter. He feels so blessed to be among them. He told All Might and Aizawa that half his quirk is fire. Maybe someday he'll work up the courage to tell them too. A mummified Aizawa informs them of the sports festival, and excitement is at an all-time high. Even Uraraka, who's usually an amiable ball of sunshine, is smoldering with competitive zeal. Midoriya and Ida hear her reason for becoming a hero while on the way to lunch, and she seems embarrassed at first but beams with gratitude when both boys assure her. Say, Deku, I just told you my reason for wanting to become a hero, and we know Ida's from a hero family, but what about you? Good question, Uraraka. If you don't mind us asking, of course, Midoriya? Midoriya hesitates for a moment. But before the silence can stretch on too long, All Might appears around the corner. Midoriya, my boy. And after that buoyant call, the hero almost shyly holds up a bento wrapped in a bunny-printed handkerchief that looks far too cute and small for his hulking form. Would you care to have lunch with me? Uraraka does a spit take as she laughs. Are you a schoolgirl? Even after Midoriya has left with All Might, Uraraka can't keep in her chuckling. I never thought I'd see the symbol of peace act like a scene from a shoujo manga. Though I do wonder why he called Deku. Ida hums and adjusts his glasses as they get in line at the cafeteria. Perhaps it has to do with what happened at the USJ. Uraraka instantly sobers at that. Midoriya is the one who made the plan and bought me enough time to get the other teachers, after all. And I hear that he held off the leader of the villains until All Might got there. It would be no surprise if All Might took an interest in Midoriya, Ida muses as he picks up his lunch. But he belatedly notices that Uraraka is uncharacteristically quiet. Uraraka? It's just, Uraraka begins with her head down. He shouldn't have had to. He shouldn't have had to fight the warp villain or the creepy leader on his own. I should have helped. I was right there. He saved me and I couldn't save him. And I feel so useless. She angrily brushes a fist over her eyes. Ida is at a loss. He's never been good at social interactions, too honest and eccentric to fit in. Midoriya and Uraraka have been infinitely understanding and kind, but he's still completely at loss on how to comfort a crying girl. He finds himself wishing for Midoriya. But thankfully, Uraraka is a strong-willed hero in training and soon lifts her head on her own without Ida having to embarrass both of them with his awkward attempts at comfort. But from now on, I'm going to do better. Be better, she says determinedly. And at those words, Ida is instantly ashamed. He thinks of how utterly lost he was without Midoriya, how he'd had to have the other boy instruct him even though he's the class president, how even just now he'd instinctively looked for Midoriya's help. He sets his jaw. As will I, Uraraka. They will do better, be better. Ida glances down at Uraraka. She has a determined expression on her face, but her eyes are still tearily bright and she's sniffling. Would you like another mochi? Ida tries, offering his dessert. Uraraka beams at him. They're too engrossed in their conversation to notice that one Todoroki Shudo has heard every single word. Toshinori guides young Midoriya to a private room, then locks it before reverting back into his true form. He takes a seat across from the boy, pouring them each a cup of tea. He's stalling. He knows this. And yet, Toshinori had originally called the boy in order to tell him that the sports festival is the best chance to spread his name to the world, to take the first step in becoming the #1 hero and symbol of peace. But he remembers what Recovery Girl said. He remembers how utterly terrified he had been at the sight of his protégé facing off villains on his own. It's one thing to see Midoriya as his successor. It's another to see the boy as his. As the previous wielder of One for All, Toshinori knows what he needs to do, what Midoriya needs to do. But as someone who's come to care for the boy, he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to put more pressure on this child who's already burdened by so much. He doesn't want to expose him more when already Shigaraki has his eyes on him. He doesn't want to put him in danger when he's already ridden with who knows how many scars. Toshinori is conflicted between his duty and his emotions. And the worst part is that he already knows what Midoriya will choose in a heartbeat. Too much like Toshinori himself, the boy will choose to do the right thing without a second thought to his own well-being. All Might? Is something wrong? Midoriya asks quizzically once the silence stretches on too long. Toshinori looks at how the boy is holding the cup of tea between his hands like a bunny holding a carrot between its paws, at the greenish dark hair pulled back into a half bun like a rabbit's tail, and at those big green eyes. Oh, it's just a sports festival. It's not like he can be hurt too severely in a school event, right? He clears his throat. No. I just wanted to talk to you about the sports festival. Considering what happened at the USJ, do you have a better hold on your quirks than before? Midoriya frowns slightly, looking down at his hands. I've been thinking about it too, and I think so. When I used One for All to kick the Nomu, I didn't get much of a backlash. Toshinori spits out his tea. Your leg was cracked in 3 different places, he protests. Midoriya just blinks. Oh. Then he shrugs. That's probably because I kicked off the ground first before kicking the Nomu. Well, at least it wasn't shattered and flopping around like a rubber chicken. And Toshinori can't even he gave the power to Midoriya knowing that the boy probably wouldn't be able to use One for All as naturally as he himself did, but he'd never known just how casual and dismissive he'd be about his own well-being. Midoriya continues as if he's said nothing wrong. It's the first time I tried to use it on a person, even if it was an artificial human, so maybe that put a brake on my subconscious. It feels like trying to cook an egg in a microwave. Too hot and or rather, I'll burst. And as for my original quirk, he hums, a crease forming between his brows. That I've only ever tried to use my pull and never tried to push out fire consciously. Even when I had to let it out because of the backlash, I've always tried to make the fire as small as possible. But when I freely used fire and my pull at the same time without restraint against Shigaraki, I didn't feel any backlash at all. Think, it's like a water hose. Whenever the fire tried to come out, I've tried to stop it at the nozzle. And that made the pressure build up and swell the pipe, eventually making the hose burst. Or in my case, violently throw up flames. Toshinori stares at the boy that's full-on muttering away now. He has two powerful quirks like super strength and fire, and he compares it to mundane objects like a microwave and a water hose. This boy is unbelievable. The man snorts, then shakes his head. Well, it's good that you figured out a way around. Especially because... And now he's going to have to do it. As the next symbol of peace, the sports festival is the best opportunity for you to announce that I am here to the world. Midoriya looks at him for a long moment. And then, just as Toshinori had predicted, he nods. I understand. Of course he does. This is the boy who tried to give up his dream and keep Toshinori from passing on one for all to him on the basis that people need the symbol of peace, after all. Toshinori swallows down the bitter taste in his throat and tries to smile. Good. I hope you have your representative speech ready. The boy looks like someone pushed the pause button. My what? An absolutely horrified expression crawls on young Midoriya's face. This time, Toshinori doesn't have to fake the mirth and throws his head back to laugh out loud. During the weeks following up to the sports festival, Izuku divides his time between doing schoolwork, training, trying to figure out his quirk, and freaking out about the speech. The student who placed first in the entrance exams annually makes the opening speech as the student representative. Izuku knew this, of course, but he's just never thought of it in context with himself. At one point, Ida suggests asking Aizawa for advice. Izuku looks at him like he's just told him to go tickle a sleeping dragon. Why not? Ida asks, perplexed. He's our homeroom teacher after all. Aren't teachers here to guide us? And well, if you put it that way. But the thing is, Aizawa is still Izuku's hero before he is his teacher. The thought of just casually walking up to the man is still foreign. And besides, Izuku has never had the concept of looking to adults for help. Eventually, though, it's Uraraka who takes initiative. One morning after homeroom, Uraraka grabs Izuku's shoulders and shoves him towards Aizawa. Deku has something to tell you, sensei, she says with a cheery grin before bolting out the door. Since their next class is PE, all the other students file out to go change until the only people left are Aizawa and Izuku, who's frozen in place. The hero turns and raises an eyebrow. Izuku gulps. Well, now that it's upon him, might as well, right? And if his fanboy heart is a little excited about talking to Aizawa privately again, well, sue him. It's just, I have to make the speech at the sports festival. I have no idea what to say, he admits. Aizawa looks like he's relaxing minutely, as if he'd been expecting something of a far more serious nature. You know you don't have to give a tearjerker or anything, right? Most people aren't even going to remember the speech. It sounds almost crass, but somehow that eases Izuku's nerves. Aizawa hesitates, then gently bumps Izuku's head with the end of his cast. Keep it simple. Don't worry about it too much. Izuku unconsciously raises his hands to rub the spot Aizawa bumped him as if committing the feeling to memory. He still has no idea what to say, but even so he's already feeling much better. Maybe Ida was on to something. Thank you, sensei, he beams. Aizawa avoids his eyes. Izuku thinks he hears, too bright, mumbled into the folds of Aizawa's bandages, but he's not sure. With his nerves at least slightly calmed down, Izuku feels a little better. But there's another thing that bothers him. Thanks to spending his early childhood being hyper-aware of Hisashi's every breath, glance, and footstep, Izuku has pretty good situational awareness, if he says so himself. And lately, his instincts have picked up on the feeling of being constantly watched. And the culprit is none other than Todoroki Shuto. It's confusing, to say the least. He and Todoroki don't really have any point of contact. Forget him, Izuku doesn't think Todoroki has anything with anyone. And Izuku doesn't remember doing anything particular to garner his attention between the time Todoroki started watching him and before, yet here they are. One day he turns at the sensation of being watched yet again to catch Todoroki staring at him. Do you have something to say, Todoroki? He asks. The other boy blinks slowly. No. At least, not yet. Well, isn't that enlightening? Izuku doesn't get a proper explanation until the day of the sports festival. And when he does, what an explanation it is. Midoriya, Todoroki calls in the waiting room. A few people turn curiously since it's rare for him to speak up, but he doesn't even give them any notice. His eyes are focused solely on Izuku. Objectively speaking, I think I'm above you in terms of practical strength by a margin, if only because my quirk doesn't rebound as much as yours. But even so, you've not only placed first in the entrance exam and faced off the leader of the villains at the USJ, but you've also got All Might's attention. At his last words, Izuku freezes. But before he can deny or deflect that all-too-true accusation, Todoroki is already moving on. I won't pry into that, but know this. I'm going to beat you. Todoroki's mismatched eyes bore into Izuku. Izuku-kun. Only blink back blankly. Where on earth did that come from? Where the hell did that come from? Izuku starts, but then confirms that no, it wasn't his own mouth that said that. Bakugo has stood up from his chair and is seething as he stalks towards Todoroki. This BSE, he jerks his thumb at Izuku while not taking his eyes off Todoroki for a second, is mine. You don't get to jump in out of nowhere and just declare him your rival. He's mine, and I'm going to beat you and him, got that? Todoroki narrows his eyes and opens his mouth as if to say something back, but Izuku decides to interject before things can get too heated between the two. I feel so loved, Izuku deadpans dryly, doing his best impersonation of Aizawa. The look Bakugo and Todoroki give him is priceless. Man, if he'd known it would be this fun, Izuku should have started talking back to Bakugo years ago. Some of their classmates are snickering behind their hands or just outright guffawing without restraint. It seems like the nervous air that has been curling around their ankles has been dispelled, including Izuku's jittery nerves. While it's an honor that you think highly of me, I'm not the only competition, Todoroki, Kaken. Everyone will be doing their best. You bet we will. Kirishima agrees with a toothy grin and a fist pump while Ashido, Kaminari, and a few others cheer along. But Izuku bares his teeth in a grin. I won't lose. He turns, leaving behind a frozen Todoroki and Bakugo. There's a beat of silence before everyone starts scrambling after him. As Izuku marches with his classmates to the arena, he finally feels ready to face the world. And it does indeed feel like the world. As soon as they step inside the stadium, their ears are assaulted by the noise. Izuku almost winces, but does his best to keep his head up as they approach the center where Midnight is waiting. The hype around Class 1A seems to be driving the crowd mad, and Izuku really does feel sorry for all the other classes. All right, fair play, everyone. Midnight calls as she cracks her whip. Now, player representative, Midoriya Izuku of Class 1A. The people from other classes grumble around them at yet another call for Class 1A, but Izuku's classmates grin and give him a thumbs up or a pat on the back as they part for him. Their encouragement and the thought that his mother, All Might, and Aizawa are all watching keeps Izuku's feet steady as he walks up to the podium. As the next symbol of peace, announce that I am here, to the world. All Might had said, keep it simple, Aizawa had advised. And at this moment what Izuku needs to say, what he wants to say is. He looks around the stadium. He looks at the spectators, the students, the teachers, the press, the heroes on patrol duty or even just here for scouting. All of them are part of this society held together by heroes. And he must be next. All Might is the symbol of peace. His very existence suppresses villainy and saves us. It begins. But he's not the only hero. Izuku thinks of Aizawa. Of the countless other heroes he's heard of on the news. Of all the other people that helped them. Even if they are not the number one, even if they are not on the front lines, all heroes and supporters work tirelessly to protect our lives, our dreams, our loved ones. They save us, and that is what makes them heroes. He sweeps out an arm over the assembled students, not just Class 1A but all 11 classes from all departments. Finally, his hand comes to rest upon his own chest. He bares his teeth in a grin. We're next. The crowd explodes. Someday in the near future, All Might will stand on the ruins of Kamino Ward with a defeated All for One at his feet. He will point into the camera, and in a parody of this exact moment, he will say, "You're next." The public will explode. Side-by-side comparison videos of All Might's declaration and Izuku's speech will break the internet. Speculations will run wild about the #1 hero and the first-year representative. But that is not for many weeks yet. The first stage of the sports festival is an obstacle course. Todoroki makes good on his declaration of war by doing his best to make even more obstacles with his ice, but Class 1A is too used to his tactics by now to fall for it. Izuku pulls himself across the ice and over the frozen 0-point bots, hitting the ground running. He already feels the fire trying to push out of him and desperately wishes for his mouthguard, but it's been sent to the support department after being mangled from too much heat when Izuku fought against Shigaraki. And besides, support items aren't even allowed for students from the Department of Heroics that don't expressly need them. Izuku has learned that freely letting out the fire instead of trying to keep it bottled up gets rid of the violent fits. But he can't just let it blaze away in open sight. Not now. Not with his mother watching. So Izuku brings his left hand in front of his body, curling the fingers as if holding an invisible ball. He carefully pushes out fire through his palm, not trying to stop it but guiding it instead. Now that he isn't trying to suppress it, the fire is pliant, obeying his will without any violent outburst. Izuku pushes out a constant flow of flames out of his palm but makes it curl into itself, forming an orb that's cradled within the cage of his fingers. This is what Izuku has been working on for the past few weeks between the USJ incident and the sports festival. Aizawa was right, he can't afford to waste precious time heaving during a battle, and the fight with Shigaraki got him thinking and experimenting until he found a reasonable substitute for his mouthguard. The constant and steady flow of pushing keeps the output balanced enough to allow Izuku to keep using his pull, but it's still contained enough that he doesn't have to worry about burning anyone else. And if the fire decides to start burning him again, the only area that will be burned is his left palm and fingers. It does completely occupy his left arm, but he's willing to sacrifice the mobility of one arm for the use of his pull. Izuku keeps his left hand that's holding the ball of flames close to his chest so that the back of his hand hides most of the light, and reaches out with his right hand to pull himself forward. Once he's negated the backlash, it's almost laughable how easily he clears the obstacle course. Ida may be made for speed, but with all the obstacles his engines don't have the opportunity to shine. Bakugo can blast himself forward, but it's only short bursts of speed. And Todoroki may have had the initial lead, but he can't really do anything as Izuku practically flies past him on the minefield without even touching the ground. Incredible! Ladies and gents, we have our winner, and boy did he make it look easy. Give a round of cheers for Midoriya Izuku. Izuku skids through the finish line, still not having a way to counteract the momentum of his pull. Luckily the obstacle course was an open lane, but he's going to have to figure out a way to do that or else he'll just smack right into a wall or something in the wrong circumstances. But for the moment, he pushes aside all thoughts of his quirk and looks around the roaring crowd. He finds All Might. He grins. Toshinori is so proud of young Midoriya. His heart swells as he watches his successor. No, he's lying if he says that now. He watches his boy and he's never, ever felt so proud in his life. Forget making a statement to the world, he just wants Midoriya to do his best and receive all the praise he deserves. What do you think? For starters, Midoriya's stock is going to rise immensely. Toshinori hears from somewhere behind him. He turns to find the students from the Department of Management grouped together and talking amongst themselves. We didn't get to see exactly what his quirk was, though. Some kind of transportation quirk. It could be some kind of telekinesis, too. Though he did keep one hand to his chest, so maybe it has a handicap. Suppose we were to sell his assets, how would we go about it? Well, since we don't have enough information on his quirk, we can start with his appearance. His looks are actually pretty cute. With those big eyes and freckles, we could sell his image to be kind and friendly. Good point. You know what, he reminds me of a bunny for some reason. Do you think we could convince him to wear a bunny costume? Strictly for promotional value, of course. And Toshinori is shaking, shoving a fist into his mouth as he wheezes so hard that he starts coughing up blood. But oh, does he want to butt in their conversation? He wants to tell them so bad that Midoriya's costume already looks like a bunny. And his boy still has no clue.